All right, all of you freedom-loving men and women, welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. And as always, and we always mean it, if you're listening or watching this podcast, you are part of the resistance. And I think now more than ever, that's becoming kind of evident and clear to everybody. As always, we're your hosts. I'm Mark, and then that knucklehead over there,
Redbeard.
And then we've got a very special guest down below on our Hollywood Squares, Blake from Fog Firearms. And matter of fact, why don't we just actually, before I roll into the introductions, let's just give you the title and the thrust, if you will, of tonight's conversation, which is going to be a little bit serious, but also a lot of fun because Blake is just kind of a smart ass. But we're going to talk about guns and things tonight. Ooh, I know, scary conversation, YouTube. Ooh, guns. Blake, if you would be so kind, sir, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Blake. I've been a lifelong hunter. I've always loved firearms ever since I was a little kid. I've loved hunting. I love being in the outdoors. Back in about 2011, I went to school for gunsmithing in Southern Colorado, started a business with my family, and we created Fog Firearms, where we do ammunition loading, general gunsmithing, Cerakote application, a little bit of everything. A lot of machining nowadays is kind of where we're focused at. But yeah, really just I've always loved the firearms industry, always loved the outdoors in general. And when I actually first found gunsmithing school, as a good friend of mine who was a taxidermist, he always told me that he goes, if you really want to go on the big hunts and all that kind of stuff, is find a good client to take you on one of those. So ever since then, I was like, yeah, I kind of would like to go overseas and do some big hunts. And I figured that would be a good way to do it. So it's kind of one of the reasons I pursued gunsmithing originally. But anyway, yeah, so that's kind of a primer on my work life. As far as personal goes, I'm married. I've got a small little acreage that me and the wife are slowly turning into a hobby farm. We've got 19 chickens right now. We had 26 at the beginning of the season, but we had a fox problem for a little while. I am slowly in the process of trying to build out a garden and more food independence. So anyway, that's kind of just a general primer on who I am.
Nice.
So.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Well, and, a little full disclosure here. So again, if you watched any of our videos, Jeremy and I don't really do our backgrounds or our bios anymore. But as I'm sure you know, I run a small company called Centerline Systems. And this fine gentleman and his colleagues do our Cerakoting work. So they Cerakote our Cobra buckles from Austria Alpine. They Cerakote our snap caps from Dot Fasteners. And then on a personal level, Blake has done a bunch of personal Cerakoting on a bunch of my items, and top-notch work. He's a pain in the butt to do a gun show with, but other than that, he's a squirrel, whatever, and I see you smiling.
Yeah.
It's true, brother.
Dude, gun shows and auction, man, that's like a bag of crack for me, dude. I love them. So
all right, hey, so jumping right into it, I think I'm going to kick this off for everybody who's watching, boys and girls. If you're listening, it's a little bit old news now. So I'm sorry, I should have said this. Today is Thursday, the 21st of September. As you all well know, this video will air tomorrow, Friday, the 22nd of September. But this is a little bit of old news. But for me, and Jeremy's going to have to rein me in because this is something I'm still absolutely livid about for a whole variety of reasons. But let's have Jeremy and Blake start this off. New Mexico and that crazy ass governor out there who just took a giant dump on the Constitution. I mean, her statement in of itself should have led to her immediate impeachment and removal. I don't see this as being binding. I don't really have to follow this. It's kind of, who wants to dive into this before I start losing my collective shit? Just unbelievable abridged. I mean, such a blatant and utter disregard for the Constitution, which is the rule of law. I don't know. I think I read that someplace. The Constitution, Constitutional Republic, America. No governor. You don't get just pick and choose which freedoms people can actually have. You didn't give those freedoms to us. God gave us those freedoms. The Constitution clearly states what the government cannot infringe upon, which are big God-given rights. All right. See, I'm already getting a little livid. Who wants to jump in here? Let's start off with Blake. Let's get him rolling right into it.
Well, I wonder what the motive is really behind it, because I mean, obviously on the surface, Mark, I think you did a pretty good coverage over, what's inherently wrong with it as far as one's ethos goes. But my question is more is why did they do it? Because they know it wouldn't stand. They know there'd be an outrage out of it. We did see quite a few individuals open carrying the day afterhand and the rally that was going on down there. And, so there was definitely a drummed up response about it. But I think more than anything, to me, I feel like these maneuvers come across more as demoralization tactics than anything. Is the nana boo boo, we have power over you. This is what we can get away with. So because she's gonna, I can't see it's a political benefit for her to say that whatsoever. I mean, she's basically falling on her sword. So then the question is why? Oh,
so you think she's falling on her sword, honestly?
Well, I mean, it is New Mexico. New Mexico is a shit show. So I don't know. It's a bizarre behavior in general, though. I don't see the benefit in it more than anything else for as far as the status quo to do it, other than it, are they trying to egg people on to try to get someone to be violent in response to it? I mean, because really, if you look at the people that showed up, it was peaceful. I mean, it was extremely peaceful, way more peaceful than what we see on the opposite side of things. So if they were looking for a response to egg on the proverbial right at that time, or really just people that are exercising the constitutional right, they didn't do it. They looked bad. It put mud on their face. So it wasn't really, I just don't see the huge benefit as far as the grand chess game goes for her to do that. So,
yeah.
Redbeard, as we come over to you, I mean, I already know my response, Blake. It's about testing the waters and it's about control. I mean, but Redbeard, your thoughts there, sir?
Yeah. So I'm me, Mark. I like to queue up certain things that our founders kind of emphasized, and one of them is by Samuel Adams. And I'm just going to start with this, and I'll kind of elaborate as I go. Samuel Adams had many things to say along with our founders regarding natural rights. And one of the things that he said was, among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, a right to life; second, a right to liberty; third, to property, together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. These are evident branches of, rather than deductions from, the duty of self-preservation, commonly called the first law of nature. So if what he's saying is, look, these are rights that come from nature. They're derived from, me being a Christian, I believe they come from God, but otherwise God creates nature. They come from nature anyways, right? So if you look at these things and they're derived from nature, then to go against this, or to be antithetical to this notion, is to say that is to go against nature itself. So you're trying to resist what nature has determined already, which is we have the right to defend ourselves with the best means available. Those means today happen to be arms. It's not limiting to the certain type of arms. So it's interesting how you have many of these people. These people don't even understand basic things about firearms, and in their mind, they don't have to in order to rule. But yet we have to have a certain opinion on something that they feel strongly about for us to be able to weigh in on it. We're supposed to be educated about these things, and for some things, because we're, and I hate to say this, because we're men, we can't possibly know. So therefore, we can't have a point or an opinion to make. So if you don't understand what you're talking about, then how can you possibly have, how can you possibly, from any point of authority, be able to say, well, you can't do this? Okay, well, again, it's antithetical to nature if we're going to go based off of the fact that we have the natural right to have arms, to be able to defend ourselves. So I think there is kind of something there also on a second point of what Blake said, like it is possible that there's more to it, obviously, than what we see on its face. Now, one thing that I will say is, several years ago, there was a huge rally of gun owners out in Virginia, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. I mean, there's that picture of the guy who brought the Barrett 50 cal out to the Capitol area, and you had all these gun owners. Nothing happened. And everybody was waiting. There's like, oh, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be this. It's like, no, like, honestly, the people that cause the least amount of problems are the people that you assume are making the most amount of problems. And, it's like, that's not how this works. Just because you want us to be the vile creatures that you say that we are doesn't make it so. But go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of it's projection, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing as far as the current world, because I mean, that summer of love, mostly peaceful but fiery riot season that we saw a couple summers ago, we were gaslighted into saying that it happened, but it wasn't violent. It happened, but there weren't billions of dollars worth of damage. It happened, but there wasn't 30 some odd people that lost their life in it. And overall, we should look at this and applaud what was accomplished in it, beside the fact of any of the racial tension there. Otherwise, it was simply, you must do as the status quo says. When you're on the opposite side of things, and you have these extremely peaceful groups of very well-armed individuals exercising the constitutional right, and they have to paint that out as what we witnessed with our own eye. They have to gaslight you on both sides of things. And I think it's this Orwellian, and I hate to use that word because it is so thrown around, overused in our time, but it works very well in the context of his work 1984. It's
not to mess your train of thought, but I mean, the Orwellian usage in our modern language, that's actually just only within the last couple of years. No one was saying we've always made references to some Orwellian future, or if somebody's doing something crazy, we say that's rather 84 Orwellian. But it never was used with the frequency it's being used today. And so there's a reason behind that.
Right. So, and that's that pill pull, that gaslighting that happens in it, of the, we're not at war with Oceania. We've always been at peace with them. And then the very next thing in the middle of the speech is, we're at war with Oceania. We've always been at war with Oceania. So it's that active gaslighting that's done on such an instantaneous scale now because of the omnipresence of technology. I mean, we're carrying around our cell phones in our pockets, and the amazing powers we can get out of it, but in the same breath, the amazing amount of propaganda that can just be spoon-fed to people. So.
Well, and I want to come back to something that both of you hit on, and I just want to bring this back into, what is this governor and other people like her? I mean, she's not alone in this, right? There's, again, we're already kind of alluding to, there's a freaking cornucopia, litany of politicians on both sides of the quote unquote aisle, who really want to limit. And I think, to both of your guys' comment, I mean, like, well, who are these people? Well, I mean, let's just think about it. They're incredibly arrogant. To Jeremy's point, they have no idea anything about weapons systems or even self-defense or any of if you go down any
60 meg rounds a second.
Yeah, but they're going to.
It's not that even the specifics matter to them. They might not even care at all. So,
well, and that's what I was going to get at, because at the end of the day, they don't really give a shit. These are just tools by which they can try to influence their control. Because whether you want to use that term, Karen, whether these are the ultimate Karens, or they're just like incredibly arrogant, or they are the people who always have to be in control. That we all know these people in our life. Who's like, you're doing something. It's like, oh, I don't want you to do that. Don't do this. Don't do this. Like, well, then how about you shut the fuck up and then you do it, right? And I'll just stop. Because apparently I can't do anything, unless you tell me what I'm doing. Yeah. But I think that's who these people are, and these people are hypocrites. And at the end of the day, not to make this into a religious conversation again, I don't care. Everybody knows this. We say this every time subjects like this come up. I don't care your political affiliation. I don't care your sexual preference. I don't care about your religious, whether you are or not religious, or what your religion is. Right. You at least believe in something if you're, going down those lines. These people don't. These are just straight up hypocrites and controlling, arrogant. And at the end of the day, I would just say these are evil people. This isn't about, I really think by banning guns in, around Albuquerque or whatever that, and then some other mayor said, well, we've been doing this for years. Yeah. And it's in litigation because it's clearly in violation of the Constitution. They don't really care. Again, just like any other thing, like the Patriot Act, there was nothing patriotic about the Patriot Act. We always wrap these evil policies up. We wrap them up in like save the children, patriot, whatever. Like, and every time I see that, I just scream, It's going to do the exact opposite.
Yep.
And they're doing it. They're using that language. They're distorting the truth, the facts, and they're doing it for political purposes. And that always, to me, comes back to evil. And I wanted to throw that out there before we go on to next things, because I know, Jeremy, you're going to have a few things to say, and Blake, I know you're going to have some things to say about what I just.
I'll let Blake take it first.
All right.
Yeah, I got just one little thing I want to say, because you hit it on the head, and you were talking about like the Patriot Act or net neutrality is another one I really like to point out. And you have to give credit where credit is due. Whether you agree with what they are or not, the government has a hell of a way of packaging a dog turd in a box with a big bow on it. And and that's really where it comes down to. And I'm not gonna. This was years ago, but there was a family member of mine and me were kind of going back and forth on net neutrality specifically. And I said, this is going to lead to a wider surveillance blanket over top of Americans. It is going to lead to more, control networks and things like that. And he's like, oh, no, it's net neutrality. It's in the name. It's neutral. And I was like, dude, that's the oldest trick in the book, and that's the thing. It's all about packaging. And that's why I think, I use the term sort of rubbing your nose in it or a demoralizing effort of what's going on in New Mexico. It's kind of the same thing as packaging these extremely egregious policies and selling them to the people. It's just a different facet of the same thing. It's control. It's gaslighting. It's trying to create a world that certain people can operate inside of, where it's beneficial for them to, I hate to say it meanly, but to be dumb and operate inside of this system, because it gives you rewards like the monkey sitting in front of the probe who gets a treat when they hit the green light, but they get shocked when they hit the red, So the world's become conducive to people falling for these tricks, and it's actually rewards you for doing that.
Right.
Well, and don't forget, rewards and punishments are, two sides of the same coin. I mean, so the reward doesn't necessarily have to be like, well, because you're talking about net neutrality. I mean, look at it. If you say the right things, and if you, oh, we love Oceania, we're at war with Oceania, and as long as you go along with that, whatever that, whichever way the wind is blowing, you will be, you won't be punished. And I guess that in today's day and age is kind of an award, right?
Yeah.
Jeremy.
Yeah. So real quick, I'm just going to kind of go back on, you brought up religion, and the only point of contention that I would have with that, Mark, is I do believe that they have a religion. I do believe they adhere very strongly to a religion, and that's the religion of self, or the religion of government.
Which is the religion of Satan.
Right. Well, and it's like you talked about the arrogance, right? And it's like, dude, like and let me get a little bit deeper here real quick. But so I read a book. It's by a man named W. Cleon Skosen, who was a former FBI person. I don't remember exactly. I think I wanted to say he worked in the field, but I don't remember exactly. But the book, he wrote two books of particular interest that I've read, The Naked Communist and The Naked Capitalist. And in The Naked Communist, he does a full overview of communism and kind of its essential tenets. And one of many is to replace essentially the idea that there is a God, that the individual would become their own God, would become their own master, to subvert this idea that you have a creator and that you control everything. And I feel like that is the level that these individuals operate on. They assume themselves gods, or they assume that they are of some type of divine nature, to where there's no repercussions for them. But quite frankly, if you really look at it, people, regardless of where you think you are, whether it's you or me or whatever, like, we all bleed. Like, we are not gods. We are creatures of a divine creator, who me and Mark, I think I can say this mildly for you perhaps, but as Christians, we understand that our God comes from our what we believe in. And and I'm not sure where Blake stands on this, but look, in the end of the day, like, it's a very dangerous arrogance to assume that you have this godliness, or this godhood, to be able to see yourself above everything else, and to feel that everything is your divine creation, because it's simply not true.
Well,
I have to just throw this out there before we bring it over to Blake, because I'm not sure where Blake's going to go with this, but I know Blake is going to know this reference perfectly. Jeremy, I'm not 100% sure how much of a fan you are, but the conversation up to this point between you guys going back and forth and who these people are and what it is that they're trying to do, and trying to take away your rights, right? These natural rights, but it reminds me of that scene in the movie Firefly, or Serenity, not the series Firefly, but the movie Serenity, where they've just discovered Miranda. And now they're back on the ship, and Mal is talking to everybody, and he's talking about the evil, the arrogance. I just realized what we've just been talking about. That's those are the bad guys in that movie. The people that's the cast of characters from that movie. Yeah. And he's talking about and he ends it with, no matter what happens, they're going to return to this. They're going to come back to this idea. And I love this part of the movie. And he says it, and I'm obviously not an actor, and I'm not Nathan Fillion, so I'm not even sexy like he is. But he comes to that, and he makes that thing, at the end of his speech, he's like, they're going to come back to this idea that that they can make men better.
Yeah.
Well, so I actually there's one other thing I want to quote from that movie, actually, before I go on to the point I was going to make. And that's when, the very end, spoilers, when Nathan Fillion is, Mal is out on that gantry system, and he had just run through the arch nemesis for the movie. And I can't remember his name. Great actor, though. And he said, the bad guy said, we're not meant for the world they're building. And I think that mentality, men like us are not meant for the world they're building. I think that mentality is what we're seeing in a lot of these people that are the big movers and players that we can identify on the scenes right now, that are trying to push the ethos. And I think what that ethos is, because it's old as time. That the whole "do unto thou what you will" sort of thing. It's the do it or do what thou will, rather. That mentality's been around since well before Babylon. And I think what we're seeing is a transvergent path right now, between individuals that, for lack of a better term, just want to live a free, or at least the pursuit of freedom, sort of lifestyle, and those that are trying to tailor make the next generation. And you can say that it's a technocracy to an extent, but it's even beyond that, because they're trying to incorporate these technologies physically into the human form as well. And they've talked about in great extent the melding with the machines. So the question is, again, to what end? And unfortunately, I think that's really the great battle of our time right now, is that, people that want to live as God made us, as we have on this earth for quite some time, and those that want to try to become their own gods, with little g gods, and be able to harness the pathway that humanity is going to evolve through. I mean, we've seen things, like Noah Harari is one of the really big examples of this as far as a transhumanist goes. But this concept, even beyond organizations like the World Economic Forum and the Bilderberg Group and all the ones we've all heard to no end, if you've been paying attention to all the things you're aware of. But there's groups even, on a smaller basis, that are trying to push this ethos, whether they're aware of it or not, to trying to bring it into reality. And that's really, I think, going to be the great battle of our time. And right now, it's not being fought kinetically, and thank God it's not, but it is being fought on the digital space. And it's boiling up to levels that have never been seen before in human history, as far as the just straight up propaganda wars that are going on, the various technological assaults that are happening to people on a regular basis, with just overflooding of stimuli. It goes, the list can go on and on and on. I don't want to beat a horse to death here, but this does seem to be what's happening. So,
and Redbeard, before you respond to that, I mean, just kind of I don't want to say give us some limits here, because again, Blake just opened up a giant can. Like there was a million of things to unpack there. But I think, for maybe the sake of tonight's podcast, instead of going down some of those, if we go down them, we go down them. But to Blake's point, I mean, this isn't a kinetic war. Again, see our previous videos, boys and girls. Like I've never even really had a chance to lay out my actual argument. But I personally believe we're already in war. And as Blake said, it's just not kinetic. There is kinetic warfare taking place throughout the globe right now. Absolutely. Again, without belaboring that. But this war is global in nature,
Yeah.
and to use another bad movie quote, it is airborne, and it's going, and it's all over the place. Matter of fact, I'm just going to throw this out there for everybody. Blake turned me on to this. I'm going to turn everybody else on to it. Go watch the show Utopia. Don't watch it on I can't remember what streaming service.
Yeah, well, so YouTube had, well, it had,
Yeah,
this was a while ago, but you could find the original United Kingdom version of Utopia that was uncensored. See, Amazon picked it up and they did their own show. But they also had the United Kingdom one on, and they censored out a lot.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. Go watch it on YouTube. It is still on YouTube, and you'll see the uncensored, and you'll see like the full episodes. But it's probably one of the most underwatched shows, and this was done before the whole coof and all that kind of madness. But it kind of ties into everything you guys were just saying. Again, we all know, if you're watching this podcast, I'm assuming you already know who Bilderberg and World Economic Forum and Soros and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All of our boogeymen.
All of our boogeymen. Yeah, exactly. The usual suspects. But back to the point, if we just want to stay in this, and I think one of the layers, again, because if you have the resources, if you had the willpower and the ability, right? So you got to have ability and motivation. But if you have these things, and if you're at this level, money doesn't even matter to you. Well, one of the areas that you're going to attack is you've got to defeat America. I mean, the rest of the world will crumble. I mean, I hate to say it, if anybody's from Australia or the UK, man, I don't know how you guys are doing it. You're already dead. Doing. I mean, like you used to be like Western countries, and I know somebody's going to be all proud to be an Australian. I'm not attacking who you are as a person and your pride in being Australian. I'm proud to be an American, but I'll be one of the first, and just like we're all doing right now. But something's wrong, isn't it? I mean, there's all kinds of things going wrong within our societies. And for the sake of this podcast, again, I think we've got a bunch of useful idiots who are who are wittingly or unwittingly doing the work of evil forces. And one of the key areas here in America, you've got to destroy America. And what are the key fundamentals that, pillars that have to be destroyed? Freedom of speech and your right to protect yourself, right? And as Jeremy said, these are natural rights. The government doesn't give me or you or anybody else these rights. These are natural rights. And if you destroy those, and then also, I mean, matter of fact, Jeremy, I wish we had Stephen on, because language is being attacked, right? It's if we change the language, look how easy it is to attack these other things. And in this case, your Second Amendment right. That mayor or that governor from New York, she was trying to change language and use it as a means to justify her unconstitutional actions. Right. Now, does that make sense to you guys, or did I just kind of go off the deep end?
I'm just going to briefly say, just to kind of wrap up my point on this whole thing before we transfer over to something else. But, I brought up the idea of natural rights, Mark, and, and then I brought up the idea that these people are arrogant enough to assume themselves to be godlike, or in the very least working in the construct of a government religion. And, in something occurred to me as I was sitting there listening to you and Blake, say your pieces. And, if we know that rights are naturally derived, if we know that that's the case, if we, and as Christians, like I said, I'm not sure, Blake, where you stand on that. I'm kind of guessing that you kind of follow along perhaps that realm, but
I'm a Christ follower, yes.
Okay. So it's, as Christians, we acknowledge that not only are they natural inherent rights, but they're rights ordained or provided by God. Right. And, so what if these people who assume themselves to be godlike, or follow this religion of government, assume that because they are godlike in their own arrogance, then they naturally provide these rights? Because, if they look at themselves that highly, if they assume themselves that high above everybody else, and they have this arrogance, then they would say, oh, well, natural rights, well, we are the gods of these people. And so therefore what they're saying is we give them these things. And it's like, that's not how that works. And that's one area that I kind of thought about briefly. But
Well, I would 100% agree with that. I think that they are that arrogant. It's the ivory tower, but it's the ivory tower to the 10th degree. I mean,
100%.
it's we can make ourselves in the image we design. We can advance our own intellect through our technology.
Yes.
I mean, it's so arrogant to speak about it, but I mean, they're even to the point where they want to make this a religion for the world. And
very brazenly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing the quote unquote Pope, meeting with other religious, high ups and discussing these sorts of things and talking about like this one pathway sort of thing. And, I whatever you want to follow is yours. That's one thing I do say that the Constitution and really our nation does quite well is that freedom of association, freedom of your own opinion, those sorts of things. Now I think in the same breath that where we go wrong is our cultural homogeny no longer exists, and that's a huge issue. But so long as that cultural homogeny can exist and the independence of ideas are there, it's a beautiful system, and it worked for a long period of time until it was absolutely corrupted for reasons that I don't want to get out too far in the weeds. But going back to your original point, these people absolutely are looking at themselves as deities, and again, that's why I said it's old as time. It goes back pre-Babylonian. It goes back to the fall, and this is something that's just unfortunately going to be with humanity forever.
And just think of, fellas, and again, everybody who's watching and listening, thank you for taking the time out of your day to, come over and listen to us knuckleheads. But I thought Blake just had a great point. I mean, and if somebody says like, oh, okay, well, they're not giving examples, that's just, that's anecdotal or that's super, official, bullshit. I'm like, really? Look at any person who's in a position like, here, I'm just going to throw Bill Gates on it. Look at his interviews, look at the smugness, look at and you just mentioned him, Redbeard, the guy who's the World Economic Forum's little poster child.
So you got Yuval Noah Harari, which is the right hand.
Harari, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, like they aren't hiding anything anymore. They're coming right out and saying, like, look, what we just learned from the recent madness. We just learned that people are willing to go along with this stuff. So if we want to start implementing other changes, we just need to start talking. We can control them. So back to both of your points. These individuals, and again, I don't know why. I guess maybe I need to watch a movie tonight, but I'm going to throw out another movie reference from the 300. As they displayed or they portrayed Xerxes in that. And I am the god. And I'm the god king, and all. And his whole perception of himself, not rooted in reality. But that's who we have. We have these people right now, and again, whether it's Bill Gates or whether it's Harari or again, the list is long, so I think that was really well said, Blake. I really like that because you have to be living under a rock not to have not heard what you just said and not have seen something in just even the last week of some individual, either in American politics, world politics, the UN, or some of these other groups, again, Bilderberg, Soros.
To the point that you were kind of saying about, it's anecdotal and they're not providing quotes or they're not providing this or that and the other one. But the due diligence is on your own. The information is out there, and just in a 10-second Google search, I went through there and I looked and saw, okay, here is a quote from Yuval Noah Harari talking about the design of human beings and how they're taking over basically this pathway and using very divine language in the process of it. Now, that doesn't mean, okay, believe that quote you read right away. Use it as a jumping off point. Go do more research and start informing yourself. We live with more technology and more research capable time or a more research capable time period than ever before in human history. We read more information on our cell phone taking a shit in the morning than our grandparents did in an entire month.
But cautionary word. I mean, again, back to the whole point. We're talking about guns and things, right? So again, take away somebody's ability to speak openly and communicate with, like-minded people or to try. Look, I want somebody to have an opposing view. I would never want to shut that down because once they get their words out in the open, there it
Yep.
is. It's laid bare. You can attack it. You can defeat it. Or
Yep.
like, yeah, that was actually a pretty damn
Yeah.
good point. And I can't, I'm going to start rethinking how I'm viewing something. We want that discourse.
We can't
Yeah.
exist in an echo chamber.
Right. But so
Right.
to your point though, Blake, even that right there. Yeah. We live in this world with all this technology and all these devices that, God, if this was existing, like 50, 20 years ago,
Right.
but look at who's controlling it. And
Yes.
again, this is going to be on YouTube. And if we do something that YouTube doesn't like, you're getting censored, you're getting shadow banned.
Yep.
Google will bring you down in the search engine. So even that, you are 100% correct. I'm not arguing that.
Yep.
I'm just trying to bring it back to the point of,
Mhm.
but we've got groups of individuals who think what you guys said, they think they're Xerxes. They think they are the
Yeah.
God Kings. They are
Mhm.
creating society, for the better, right? They know best. YouTube just banned here, kind of going off tangent. Russell Brand, they just demonetized him. He hasn't even been charged with anything yet. Who in the
Yeah.
heck is YouTube to
Yep.
make this decision? That's not how discourse works, right?
Yeah.
He is innocent until proven guilty. Period.
Yep.
That's how the system works.
It
All right.
shows you
We
how
all kind of
Yep.
started going down a
Yep.
bunch of fun rabbit holes.
All right.
Jeremy, you were
All right.
clapping when Blake was speaking. Do you want?
Yeah.
You got something specific?
Yeah,
to
no,
say?
you both bring up just great points. And I know the last time I spoke, I kind of said that was kind of my last thing, but this is truthfully my last thing on this conversation. Then we'll try and do a nice little shift over. But
I already got that figured out, buddy. I got the segue.
so,
I got the segue, buddy.
But I just want to say, Xerxes bled in the end of the day, right?
Yeah, right.
Like he thought he was a god. He thought he was infallible. He thought he was incapable of being hurt. And I'm here to tell you that one of the most earth-shattering things in the world is when these people who presume themselves to be higher than flesh and blood finally see some type of impact. And dude, I'm here to tell you, like, look, you're not what you think you are. And I think that, getting over that hump for a lot of people, because don't get me wrong, like Mark, I've talked to you about this several times. When I broke away from my idea of, I think all of us were raised under the premise, and it's a very insidious premise growing up, which is you do not question authority. As a kid, as an adult, you do not question authority. That was a mentality pounded into our heads, both at home, going through school, and a good portion of our adult life, our young adult life. And it's like, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this. And look at where that has brought us. It's brought us to become a people of unquestionable loyalty, even though that what's going on, whether it is the 2A issue, or whether it's the first A debate or issue, or the fourth or whatever. Like, look, we have been conditioned. You want to talk about grooming? There's more than one type of grooming. We were groomed to be abused, and we sit here and take it. We are groomed to this point to where we don't take a stand anymore because we were told it was wrong for so long. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But let me tell you, tyrants bleed. That's all I'm going to say. And when you realize that, you become a lot less scared about what they do. So,
Blake, final comments on that? I mean, I agree. You couldn't say it better. Actually, they all bleed, and the thing is in the modern world, that doesn't necessarily mean physically. We've seen what happens and how quickly someone so powerful can just come tumbling down, from not really being in the public world to just being wiped away. Now, in the same breath, though, too, is how many times are those just yet another pawn that's put up by a force we can't see?
Correct.
And that's the one thing is I look at a lot of these big players as more like legates than I do the real power behind the scenes. They are the legionaries that are given the orders that then go carry it out. Klaus Schwab is really a lieutenant at best, in my opinion.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, he's not the general. He's not Napoleon or yeah.
Nor Soros.
Yeah. I don't know if he's a
Yep.
lieutenant, but maybe
Yeah.
he's a major because majors is when you get lobotomized. So I'm saying that in my own defense. I retired as a captain 03E, and I don't want to be thrown into that belt. Hey, my last comment on that though, going into this again, this general conversation, we're still talking about guns and things. But we've been making some movie references, and Jeremy, you're talking about, one of the great things of that movie is, even at the day, a God King, realizes, can bleed, right? Or however that line goes from the movie. And I just got to give a quick little plug out. Movies are great. I hate Starship Troopers, the movie. I actually like the Starship Troopers animated series. But go read Heinlein's Starship Troopers if you want to really understand the story. But in this, we've made a couple references to Xerxes and the 300s, and I just got to throw it out. I mean, Stephen Pressfield. I mean, you got to go read Gates of Fire, and that guy has produced so many great books, and he's obviously a man on his own journey and trying to figure out his not just his books are great, but I mean work of fiction based on actual events. But he tells a great story of Thermopylae and who the Spartans were in the Spartan culture. Doesn't pull any punches. I mean, Spartan culture was. I mean, you can make a pretty solid argument that Spartan culture was pretty horrific, but that, well, that's a separate argument, were the Spartans great warriors? They were until they finally were defeated, but up until that point, so everybody goes through that period, but just, and maybe I'll leave a little comment in the video, but Stephen Pressfield, go read Gates of Fire if you want to learn more about Thermopylae. And matter of fact, it's kind of funny how this all came up. I mean, Thermopylae, again, it can be a little bit contested. No, I'm kind of going down a slight rabbit hole, but it was just a week or two ago. I mean, that's historically thinking that's probably when the battle was fought. And that's kind of based on, Salamis and some other things where we do know the dates, but yeah, so it's kind of funny. We just all talking about, the Spartans and these other kind of iconic figures, that we now interpret to stand for freedom. Right. And shit, where did freedoms come from? Where did all this? Well, it started with the Greeks. Maybe that's an all of our subconscious, and we're talking about.
Can I actually jump in to a point you just made? Right? So you hit it on the head. The recent arguing of where the hot gates were and that sort of thing, and it's this constant rewriting of history that we're seeing right now. So isn't it interesting that basically for about 1,500 years, Western European historians all agreed about a large amount of things, about cultures, about areas, about this motif that was established about how the world was and how it operated and who people were before us and where they were located and how they lived their lives. And then all of a sudden, like in the last 100 years, that's all bullshit. We're going to say, it's this corded knot society where, because they all do the same kind of knots. It's this area here, and there weren't migrations. And, we never really went across the seas early on. And, that's just, humans, we were pretty primitive for a long time. Isn't it interesting how they change these core fundamental ethos, these things that drive young men to accomplish great things, to become as good as they possibly can, or young women as well, or just cultural things in general, the things that led to the building of cathedrals, the greatest architecture that's ever been seen in human history, and still to this day has yet to be topped. And we undermine these and we change these narratives, or we destroy Viking artifacts that are found in Sweden because they don't fit the status quo. It's not just the current day that's completely bombarded with propaganda. The past is being obliterated. Yep. It's being rewritten. The future is being pre-decided by these peoples. And the modern day is controlled on a minute-by-minute basis of your life. So it's all three of these things together. And I think that's just, that's just a bone to pick. It's like ISIS. What's the biggest thing people think about with ISIS? Oh, it was just general terrorism. Well, realistically, what's the most impactful thing that they did in human history? They wiped out Gilgamesh's courts. They destroyed everything that was from the old Babylonian palaces. They did it with such precision that future generations will laugh and say there was no such thing as Gilgamesh's Grand Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry.
No, it's
great.
A great point because I think this still fits in. I mean, like, you have to erode some of the major pillars, right? In the First Amendment, I'm going to morph this a little bit. It's the freedom of speech, assembly, petition. Because it's more than just speech, right? Religion. But to your point, speech is part of it. And so language is speech, right? Speech is, the written language.
Closest thing to magic that exists.
Yeah. So no, you're absolutely right. So we have to distort language. We have to I think I heard this from Spoon the first time. 2 + 2 is potato. Like what? Yeah, that's right. You better agree with me. 2 + 2 is potato, mother. Or otherwise you're going to get to the gulag. It's like that's the world we're living in. That's just another, in my personal humble opinion, that's another one of the theaters of war that is taking place right now. And honestly, we're losing
one of the primary.
Go ahead.
Oh, I said, if not one of the primary theaters of wars.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the mind. Here is where everything is controlled. And like to a point you made earlier, Mark, it's not the monetary systems anymore. It's the human labor. It's the individual. That's the currency. And to a point that you made, Jeremy, earlier on as well, is the education system. It's educate them just intelligent enough to punch the buttons and do the job. Nothing more, because we don't want them to ask questions. So they've struck this beautiful balance with this new generation right now of like, just dumb enough to consume and buy everything that's put in front of them, and just smart enough to do the job. But, they're not going to ask any friggin' questions, and it's terrifying. And it's really is this split between the techno sapiens and homo sapiens and all the useful idiots that go along with the techno sapiens. So
let me kind of use that. That's a great point. Let me just use that and segue into I mean, again, all of these questions will still kind of come back into guns and things, but on that note, right? So we're in a new form of warfare. We're talking about language, speech. We're talking about who are the people who are trying to lead, quote unquote. Guy, I keep thinking of one of the worst people in modern history, that PM from New Zealand. Again, to the great people of New Zealand, I'm not picking on you, but if you voted for a Darren, I mean, like just like, people in Chicago, like, rising up and complaining about, like all the illegal immigrants, and like, well, you voted for this guy, and that they told you what they were going to do. And, what do they say? The chickens have come home to roost. But, on that note, Blake, what you're kind of getting at, we're, again, people who do think themselves gods, Xerxes, or the useful idiots or the paid shills. And so we've got to erode speech, and we have to erode everybody's confidence. And I think your ultimate point is, we all should be independent. We all should have this. We're Americans, for the love of Pete. Of all the humans, of all the nation states out there, because other humans can have the same feelings of freedom and individuality that we have, but culturally, we are that, beacon on the hill, that bastion. This is who we are supposed to be. And yet to this day, to Blake's point, there are all kinds of people who are either paid actors, and this is what gets promoted, or, one of my favorites is like, oh, I was in the military and I'm going to tell you how it's supposed to be, or I'm going to, like, you guys shouldn't even be doing this. You shouldn't be talking about this. Like, that's, beyond you. Like, no, it's not. That's exactly what you guys kind of see where I'm getting at here. I get Jeremy, kind of thrown out there. It's a little bit of that dirty civilian kind of, because there was like 2 or 3 people recently who found their way onto CNN and other mainstream media, who, throwing out there, well, I was in the military and I'm here to tell you, no one needs that. Like, hang on a second.
Like that general that was shooting the 223. Did you see that footage on CNN? He's sitting there, and he's shooting a 223, and you can tell he's not even shouldering it right. It's hurting him. Right. And you got to look up this footage sometime. It's pretty good. So.
But what do you guys think about that? Again, because again, we're talking about guns and things. So in the vein of this conversation, again, look, when Feinstein or Pelosi or Mitch McConnell or, any of these idiots talk about guns, I just, I'm not listening to a single one of those people. But to Blake's point, social media, what we're using to communicate with people right now, and is being used in a very nefarious, evil way to subvert people's ideas or their thoughts of, no, I'm in my own individual and I have freedoms that are given to me, natural rights, not granted to me by the government. And yet you've got more and more of these people coming out saying no one should be able to do that. Or look, okay, I can do this twofold. Speech. Hey, you've got a freedom of speech, but you don't have the freedom to say hateful things. Well, no, actually, that's what the First Amendment protects, is the things that you don't like to hear. And then on the Second Amendment side, no, I don't have to be a police officer or a soldier to actually own these platforms and be proficient in them again. And I've made this argument before, but I know Jeremy's going to really tap into this. My argument is that if you have an obligation as a citizen in the United States to be as independent and lethal as you possibly can, because no one's coming to save you. Police aren't there to prevent the guy. If Charlie Manson kicks through my door right now, is there a cop anywhere around here? It's on me to protect my home and hearth. You guys kind of see where I'm going with this? Who wants to?
Well, Mark, I have to kind of go off on a tangent here, regarding this, because I feel like, unfortunately, especially as it pertains to 2A stuff, and firearms and stuff like that, that for some reason there's this idea that whether you served in some capacity of law enforcement or the military, that's an automatic qualifier of knowing what you're talking about. And I'm sure Mark, and I'm sure Blake has probably seen this too, but it's like, and I've talked to people to where it's just like, they actually let you have a firearm. Like, dude, you can't even tie your boots. It's like, it's society. I don't want to say society always, but society today equates competency with a title, and that's not the case, because we used to have some form of a meritocracy to where people who understood how to do something, and they were capable of doing something, and they worked and they learned and they educated themselves on how to do something, got into more important or more pressing positions that required more skill, or whatever the case is. But now we just have this idea of like, okay, this is how I'm going to live my life. I'm going to take this occupation. And for some reason, that's an automatic amount of credibility, and when it's quite frankly not the case. And, if that was the case, if the qualifier to understanding something like how a firearm operated was you had to be in the military or you have to be in law enforcement, therefore you understand every facet of every single thing, including more specific things like the effects on a body or an animal or whatever, then why is it that our founders, if that's what they truthfully thought, like some people imply, then tell me why there were independent, unorganized militias, because there is a difference between organized and unorganized militias. And these were made up of individuals, and unorganized may be also considered more of like the Minuteman contingent, to where it was concerned citizens that prepared on their own. But look, if that was the case, then how did they exist? How were they allowed to defend their properties and their homes and their towns? I mean, for God's sakes, the women of that time, which quite frankly, I wish we had more of them. The women of that time took up arms, and there's a number of them that I've brought up on this podcast before. They took up arms and defended their towns when the men were gone, right? So if our qualifier is the fact that you have this uniform or you have this authority, so therefore we're going to conflate that with understanding how things work, then we're completely lost. Because that, in my experience, and I'm sure Mark, you can attest to this, and Blake, I'm sure you'll have something to say. In my experience, that's not the case. So, I mean, how do we begin conflating those two things with people who supposedly are experts in this? And it's not to pick on anybody, but it's like, dude, like,
well,
no, before we turn it over to Blake, finish your thought. Go ahead, pick on somebody. Redbeard, finish your thought before we turn it over.
I mean, the reality of it is like, I'm just saying, like, dude, like, just because you wear something or because somebody told you you're special doesn't mean shit. Like, you could be the most incompetent motherfucker on the battlefield, and you have dudes that literally are just like, I don't want to be around that guy. Or you could have a cop that's like, well, I have this and I do this, and so therefore I must know what I'm talking about. No, you're dumb as shit, dude. The only reason you got in is because you knew somebody. Like, and there's a lot of that shit happening, and people don't want to admit it because it deconstructs this idea of American exceptionalism, which we haven't experienced for a long fucking time.
Amen.
Yeah, I was glad somebody took it to that level. All right, Blake, because that is part of our acceptance. Yeah, right. Blake, well, I know you've got a million things to add to that, sir.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. When we used to pride ourselves on education, I mean, what's crazy to consider is if you actually took someone that is quote unquote well educated today, like generally well educated today, and you went and had them have a conversation with somebody from like, say, 1850. Oh my gosh, dude, that person would run circles around them from 1850 compared to the modern person.
100%.
Like the even what was taught at like a 6th grade level blows out most people's like actual knowledge base right now. So what we have is, credential mills. It's put money in, get your credentials, stand atop the ivory tower. Go
Can
ahead,
I just do a quick timeout?
Yeah.
I just got to fill you in. You don't know about this, but if you've heard Jeremy Redbeard laughing, we were just having this conversation a couple nights ago. None of this is scripted. That just happened effing naturally, and that is effing honest or awesome. And
Love
that's
it.
why Jeremy is laughing like a school kid over there, because we literally just had that conversation. Go ahead, Blake.
Well, but that's the thing is we have this ivory tower mentality, this gatekeeping, this control, be it from, how to plant crops to how to manage one's household to how to deal with a stovepipe in your firearm, or if you should even carry or have a firearm in the first place is irrelevant. It's these people that just think, I'm better than you because I have this piece of paper or I've been put in this position of authority. It used to be that when back in homesteading America, back in the good old days, man, and I wish I would have lived on that time, even though it would have been awful. It would have been great. If you needed something, you had to fashion it. You had to learn about it. You had to read about it. You had yourself to rely on. And one of the biggest issues with Americans, I should say United States citizens, true citizens, is we have a tendency to be very, very individualistic. Yeah. So much so that when you get a group of us together, we look around and go, fuck, are we a collective? Like a group of individuals, it doesn't work well. It just doesn't bode because we're so self-reliant. The true mentality of the American spirit was so self-reliant that when you actually run into that, a lot of people have a tendency to turn their nose up to help. So, I think that I'm going in a little different direction here now with this point, but I think that one of the things that Americans really need to do is focus on what is it we can affect in our local community and how can we help other people in our neighborhood. How many of us even know the neighbor across our house, our street's name? Or the one to the left or the one to the right, or how many of us know the entire neighborhood? Or know that if, say, something were to collapse, know that that neighbor across the street's not going to come and go, I need food, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get that food because they're not prepared. Because maybe you didn't even go out and have that conversation with them and go, hey, you got some extra rice and beans. Things are expensive. You don't necessarily need to go that whole level of, hey, man, things are bad. Like, you should go get food. No, just go, what if the power goes out for a bit? You got a week of food? Do you have a month of food? So I think that's kind of one of those big things is we need to pull back as a community as well, but a community of individuals. So,
Well, before I turn it over to Redbeard and maybe I can add to the little bit of the flavor of Blake and, and add Redbeard to your nice plate of laughing, like this, conversation. But, on that same note, it's just a neighborly thing to do. How do you not know your neighbors? And I guess maybe in an urban setting, that's just weird. But so kind of, again, tying everything you guys have kind of talked about, well, it seems like that's being constructed or it's being deconstructed. Like you don't talk to your neighbor across the hall. Like, why in the hell wouldn't you? Or the guy who lives,
incentivized.
Exactly. No, you should know that. Again, it doesn't always have to be for some wazoo, like, the sky is falling type event. But I mean, but things happen, right? And it doesn't have to be a nuclear war. It could be a flood. It could be, a fire. It could be, a blizzard. There's a whole cacophony of issues that happen in normal life because nature, there's that thing called Mother Nature. You don't control it. I know somebody right now is already like, oh, tinfoil hat.
It could be Father Nature.
Yeah, we are trying to control nature. See, that's it. Because we think we are God kings, and we are trying to do that stuff. Shit, Bill Gates with his freaking releasing the goddamn mosquitoes. I mean, like, how is that even authorized? Like, what the F? But
Yeah, and who gives these people the permission to do this stuff?
Right.
You know, I mean, is it just them saying, "Hey, I've got the power. I'm just going to do it," and then government's like, "Yeah, sure. He gives us a lot of money. I was just down at this unnamed island in the Caribbean, and man, it was a lot of fun.
It was crazy."
Yeah. So, really, like a blue and white pattern on everything. It was great. A kind of a Greek temple feeling.
That was a great pull right there. I'm high-fiving you on that one. That was a great pull. That was a great reference, but that's exactly it. I just want to throw one thing into that, kind of getting back into the serious nature of things, what you're saying, Blake, this is maybe going away from the gun side of it, but again, this is guns and things, right? So know your neighbor, know your limitations, Jeremy, Jeremy's heard me say this ad nauseum. Blake's actually heard me say it ad nauseum in our personal conversations. But I know I've said this on the podcast a bunch of times too. You've got to be brutally honest with yourself. And when you're actually assessing your capabilities, your limitations, your strengths and weaknesses, however you want to look at it, you can't. And matter of fact, it just kind of even came up in our pregame, like the whole thing about, because we all know that guy, or we've met that guy in our lives who's like, he's always puffed up and he's like, oh, well, if shit goes, I'm just going to grab my stuff and I'm going to head to the woods. Like, no, you're not. I mean, you're not going to do that. And if you do, well, then, tell me which woods you're going to so I can be someplace else, because I don't want to be around you. And you're probably going to be dead within 30 days, right? You've never walked 20 miles with with 80 pounds on your back. You haven't even taken into consideration that everything that you use is now gone. It's not like Star Wars, I've got this little magical thing, beep, beep, boop, 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 and there's another Band-Aid. It doesn't work that way. That's not the real world.
Finite supplies.
Well, so again, I'm bringing that up to kind of go back into where we're kind of started. A lot of these, useful idiots or talking heads, it seems to me that they always seem to be the people who are forgetful of these real basic, tenets. Like, hey, you should know your neighbors, and no, everybody has a right to this. Again, maybe I'm trying to bring it back into this, dirty civilian conversation, but it's like, you guys shouldn't be able to do that. Like, do you know who the people were who used to do this stuff all the time, or who still do it right now? It's the people who aren't living in the urban environments. And even a lot of people in the urban environments, more and more people are waking up to this and like, hey, I need to have a little, I'm going to grow some stuff in my backyard, or I'm going to have we used to call them victory gardens, I guess, but like I'm going to have a little victory garden in my front yard, or I'm going to do my own canning, or I'm going to get out of the city as often as I possibly can, because, an hour away, there's a great range out in the country and I can go out there and shoot and I can like learn some skills, because ain't no one coming to save me. It's going to be me that's going to save me and my family.
But God forbid you collect rainwater, Mark.
Well,
you filthy fucking animal, you. How dare you collect rainwater?
No, but for people who might not know what you're talking about, could you please just this is a real thing. Can you just expound upon that briefly?
So, I don't remember. I don't know if we have it here in Minnesota, but I believe in Wisconsin, and I think in Michigan as well. You can actually get fined or in trouble for collecting rainwater. And it's like, okay, so that's implying that is literally implying that the government owns the rainwater. So if that's the case, like, first off, to collect rainwater, I'm gonna paint a picture here. If you own a parcel of land, that land is presumed yours, correct? So if you own a parcel of land, do you not at that point also, at least in that parcel, own that piece of sky to a certain degree, right? Or to a certain level anyways. So if you have rain that happens to just kind of, flutter itself over into your area, and it falls into your land, and your land happens to have a catch basin, it would imply that now, by nature, that rainwater that you collected is now yours. But the government is like, oh no, we can't have that, because reasons that very many of them not so much won't disclose, but can't actually articulate because of how absurd it really is. They can't articulate a reasonable argument for it. That they can't have that because God forbid you actually have a resource that you can use that doesn't rely on government. It's not government supplied. And so it's an absolute asinine thing. I mean, this goes into the realm too of in Minnesota, the morons in our government actually contemplated and were trying to pass it to where you couldn't have a fucking wood stove. Like, dude, we get to negative 50 here, for God's sakes. Negative 50. Like that's 20 or 30 degrees away from how cold it gets to freeze fucking Freon lines in helicopters and shit, right? Like it's fucking cold. And so these people are some of, like, again, I think they have this presumption of being godlike, or you have people that legitimately are that dumb because it's like, are you not aware of where you live to the point to where like it all goes out the window. Like the idea that they own something that inherently falls in your parameter of property is just going to show you that unless you assert your property rights, they will walk all over you. They will walk into your property. They will send their agents into your property. They will say that we are arresting you for doing something on your property. And it has happened. People have been arrested for simply building a fucking pond on their property. And if that should terrify the crap out of everybody. Like,
and it's all done under the auspices of, we're the Department of Natural Resources, we're the
BLM.
Land
The BLM is one of the worst.
Yeah, and so therefore we know better than you. Look, I'll just to Jeremy's point, and I'll come over to Blake. But it's so right now it technically last weekend was the opening of small game, which is also the opening of deer season if you're into archery. And so I just love, so in Minnesota, somebody else sets the rules on how many animals you can harvest, and they do these zones. And, to some extent, I get it. You got to have natural, terrain features or roads, because otherwise, how are you going to make a zone? But whoever is the individual or the group of individuals that are going out there and trying to ascertain, hey, I don't even know what their formula is because it makes no sense. Like, in Redbeard, you know what I'm talking about? Where I used to live, I could only harvest one deer, but on my 40 acres that I had, like, I knew what my population was like. Oh, this year I need to take 2 does and 1 buck. I knew I was paying attention. But they're saying no, you can only take one animal, either it's a hunter's choice or it's a buck only this year. Whatever their thing is. But like, not even 100 acres away is a blacktop, and on that side of the blacktop, you can take 5 animals. I'm like, like
the same way where I am.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? But so some individual who, malfeasance or misfeasance, either they're just complete idiots or they're intentionally doing this. Like, but over there you can take 5 animals. But like, what, deer don't walk across roads? I mean, what world are you living in? And these are the people who. I know this is a small example, but going back into the bigger picture, guns and things, these are the people who we somehow either are electing to office or we're allowing to be in office somehow, or they're they are the hired bureaucrat who isn't elected and somehow is actually. Okay.
And that's what I would say it is. And it's obfuscation through bureaucracy, because what they've really set up a system of is going, don't blame me. It was this council that voted to have a referendum to do a study, which had a study group that came up with a problem. It's problem reaction solution. And ultimately, when you can keep it so obfuscated through so many different bullshit layers of bureaucracy that our freaking tax dollars go to funding, and we have no say whatsoever in voting these people in, that's how things are controlled now. And that's why there's no accountability anymore. And when you go, it was such and such as a politician's problem, that's what caused this. And he goes, but my staff recommended this study that was done because of this and that, that there's no accountability. And then that's really how things are ruled right now, is we are ruled like Darius's Bing counters in Persia, or the Holy Roman Empire, under what the hell was her name? I can't even remember now. But beyond the point, this is late stage bureaucratic empire bullshit that we've seen time and time again through history. You know, history doesn't rhyme, or history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. You know, it's an old saying, tried and true. We are seeing late stage collapse situation stuff right now. So,
well, and just quick, if I may just add real quick on that, I remember a saying, and I don't remember from which point it originates, but politicians or anybody in office, especially as it pertains to today, they're not elected anymore; they're selected. So if you genuinely go to the polls and you're like, oh yeah, they're gonna take this into account, dude. Like, they don't give a shit about you. Like, they're just giving you this at this point to give you a participation trophy. Thanks for coming. Well, you know, you did something, really. Like, if we did something and we had the express amount of power that we thought we did, you know, and half the education that we should, like, we wouldn't be here. But I think a lot of this is now it's just this charade game, to where it's like, you think you have a choice, but really that choice was made 4 years ago before we even got to this point. They knew who they were putting up there. So
the illusion of choice.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Yeah, it's the illusion of a choice. Yep. You know, and this is that smoke and mirrors. This is that gaslighting that we see on everything. You know, it's we curate your life. Okay, here's your choices that we pre-select for you. You know, if you get outside of those choices, there will be consequences.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
And we see that among multiple people that step outside these boxes. You know, it's the old, I mean, we've been quoting media and whatnot. So it's the South Park sold, do you want to vote for the douche sandwich? Or no, the douche bag or the turd sandwich? Now, there's your choices. Which one do you want? Those are the only two you got. You can't vote for the third. It's got to be one or the other.
That was a great series of episodes, you know, because they just did not let that go, did they?
And,
you know,
that
the turd sandwich, the douche or whatever,
Well, and that's awesome. A perfect example of what this current environment is. Look at the creators of South Park and what they used to do, and look at what they now produce. They're not the same show. They might be the same actors, they might be the same things, and there are times they'll still hit the jabs, but everybody pulls their punches anymore.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, and then so, you know, everybody pulls their punches, right? And I'm going to kind of use that and actually some of the things, you know, you guys have just said, and I kind of it's not a great leap, but everybody pulls their punches. Everybody's afraid to speak. You know, again, again, if Steven was here, he's way better at linguistics, but he could talk about, you know, like how the history of this, and, you know, and the I guess maybe you could even look, you know, at the historic and then, you know, and I'm sure he would even like go into like, you know, you can just even look at how language, well, for example, like, you know, how the dictionary was subverted, and now, you know, the definition of vaccine has been changed, and so many definitions have been changed. And again, 2 + 2 now equals potato, right? So language is being assaulted because if we 100%. Have that that incontinuity, that fracture in how we can even communicate, you know, Blake, to your point, well, who you are or what you're doing, is that a result of, because if you say the wrong words, and if you don't say, you know, like, again, go back to Orwell at the very beginning of the conversation, you know, hold it, are we enemies or are we friends today? I'm not really 100% sure. So that gives you some uncertainty. And then to Redbeard, you know, I know you're going to know where I'm going with this. Well, then the government can step in and say, well, we've got this, you just listen to us and do what we tell you to do. But Blake, go ahead.
Well, I think, you know, again, going back to Orwell, that was the crux of the book 1984. Okay. I mean, so the main character of the book, he actually worked in the Newspeak dictionary department. And I can't remember, it was the Ministry of Truth or whatever the hell it was.
I think it was the Ministry of Truth.
Yep.
Yeah. And his goal was to go through and work on the next iteration of the Newspeak dictionary, where they had removed things like excellent and fantastic, and they had changed them to double plus good. Well, in the book, if I remember right, they were on like the 13th or the 14th iteration of the Newspeak dictionary. And the idea behind, and this is, I think, really where his core concept of the book came from, was if you can reduce the spoken word down so much where the individual doesn't even understand what the concept of an individual is, let alone how to articulate something like a revolution or a act against the government, because the language does not exist for it. All right. So that, I think, was really the core point of what 1984 was, this devolution of the language. And I would argue, you know, we're on probably the third, if not fourth iteration of it now, where I mean, if you look at the younger generations and how they talk, you're like, yo cap for real. Like, I don't know what yo cap means. I've heard it so many times, and I've been told what it is so many times. I have no idea, but it's the evolution of the complexity of the English language, or even for that matter, any language. It's like I said earlier, language is the closest thing we have to magic. There's power in our words. We speak something, we can't take it back. Okay, but how we articulate that concept, how we articulate the idea, how we convey that to everybody else, it holds true power. And when you can steal that power from the average person, where they can't organize a community to go, hey, food's expensive, we should start growing locally. And you're going to get the normal, oh, it's communistic bullshit. No, that's just how Westerners have done it for ages. All right. We prepare for winter. You know, it's one of the reasons I argue about the concept of Minnesota nice. Minnesota nice exists because you know that you might be reliant on your neighbor for saving your ass when you're freezing to death and it's negative 50 degrees out. That's why we have things like, hey, buddy, how you doing? And the Minnesota goodbye that never freaking ends. So
I would say we're overwhelmingly passive aggressive because there are definitely times to where we can be complete assholes and probably and it's funny because we're often I think depending on how far north you are, and I used to work up by the Canadian border. It's funny because Canadians to many degrees are somewhat the same, albeit they're polite assholes in some ways, but we are like just south of that standard to where like we'll be nice to a certain point, but then it's like when you piss us off, it's just like, no, like seriously, like get the fuck out of here. I'm not.
Is that not the European mentality? And has been throughout history. It's the listen, we're gonna take it on the chin a whole bunch of times, but eventually,
all right,
you're not gonna like to see what happens. So please let us do our thing.
Yeah, it's like you interject the knife hand, and you're like, no, I've had it. Like that. That's it. This is where there's. You know, you don't even have open hands anymore. It's just edged weapons.
It's just a blade.
So bringing that back in then, guys. So like, so are we? Is there a dissolution? Is there a fracturing? You know, again of the. Are we being? You know, Blake, you brought this up earlier. You know, homogenous. You know, like this is America. We're kind of brought together by values or beliefs, or the rule of law, the Constitution, right? You know, a document written by men that's saying men don't have any say or control over any other man in these following areas, right? And you know, and what you guys are just talking about, you know, like there's these language that, see, to me, the whole thing, that was a great example because, you know, I live in northern Minnesota and I know what these two knuckleheads are talking about. And unless you live up there, that may not have been, you may like, what the hell are those? What are those guys saying? But I guarantee you've got your own regional examples of that, right? You know, wherever you live in the world, right? You know, there's something. I mean, like, I remember actually, you know, like, there's I'll just a little stupid story. I was in Nova Scotia once, and I was out on, I guess that would have been
Nova Scotia, bud.
Yeah, but I was on like the southwestern part of Nova Scotia, and driving back into Halifax. And I'd stopped someplace and I was getting some food, and I'd asked what was obviously, you know, a touristy dumb question. I was obviously not Canadian, you know, and even though some people say, "Oh, where are you from, Mark?" You know, like, "Oh, come on, man, I don't talk like that." But I remember like the person, you know, the person behind the counter was looking at me like I was crazy. I'm like, you can't. I'm like, but you know, somehow Quebec came up, and I said Quebec, and it was like, oh my god, like the Quebecois, don't even, you know, like don't even compare. So every culture has their similarities. What you guys were just talking about, But bringing that back kind of full over, but doesn't that still just come back into, again, if we're going to talk about guns and things, speech, right? So for America, the First Amendment, it's one of our founding pillars, right? You know, if we lose the First Amendment, the country's over. It doesn't matter about the 5th and the 4th and the 14th, the 10th. All that is irrelevant.
What's all that really matter? Number 1 and number 2.
All
that really matter.
And so there, I want to kind of bring that in because you guys just gave two different examples. One is a direct assault on the First Amendment, and then other is this more cultural assault on language. So if I can't defeat the First Amendment, I'll do what, Blake, you were just saying. I'll just keep dumbing down the language and
Destroyed.
changing it to a point where then look, Jeremy and I've talked about this a million times, Blake, and I fell victim to it. I think the last podcast or one before, I said something about, our democracy. I'm like, God dang it, we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, and I know that. And
I
so
actually
don't
want to
ever
make
even
a point. Can I say one thing real quick?
No, jump in.
All
man.
right, so the your democracy thing, I don't remember who I heard say this the other day, but man, it really clicked for me. And I was like, you're right. This makes sense. Every time we hear the established media presence, so your CNN, your MSNBC, your Fox News, all of these legacy medias that have been around for a long time, and then the talking mouths that exist on them, and the politicians that give them their order, when they refer to the term our democracy, they're not talking about us. And that's one of the things I'd never really put that together until just recently when this person put it. It's their democracy.
Yeah.
It's this divergent path that we've been talking about. It's the democracy they want to create. And to do that, the constitutional republic must die. Because these are two mutually exclusive ideas of forms of governance. Okay. So what's happened is the old world has died, and we've moved on into now this birthing of what they're trying to bring about as their democracy, and what I would say are trying to bring about which is the phoenix rising from the ashes, this resurgence, this rebirth of American constitutional republicanism. And so that's all I really wanted to say about that. It finally clicked when I kept hearing our democracy. Oh, it pissed me off so much. Well, they're not talking about our democracy because we don't have a democracy. So.
That's right. Jeremy, I know you got something to throw in there. Oh, Jeremy may have frozen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You froze though for a second. Actually, you're frozen in a really cool pose because you're kind of laughing, or you've clearly got something to say about what Blake just said.
That's the pondering face.
Yeah, you're pondering like, oh, I'm gonna go ballistic on this, but we can hear you, sir.
Yeah, I just want to stop regarding that because it's interesting because we've all seen that video of like, oh, this is extremely dangerous to democracy. Well, notice how any time that there's any form of like rebellion in the minds of people, they're like, oh, these people are a threat to American democracy. Why? Because they disagree with you. Like you are literally like, and this shows, like, let's be honest, like this does show the frugalness of these politicians, to where they have this godlike complex, but at the same time, the fact that a dissenting opinion is enough for them to send armed men to your door, who really is terrified at that point? They're so threatened by the fact that you think for yourself that we should take the initiative and be like, okay, like you really are frugal. You really are these people who have this built up this image of power, and we can destroy this by simply having a different opinion. And that's what they're terrified about. And so, like, to me, it's interesting because, as Mike said, like, our democracy, okay, well, fuck your democracy. And then they get up in arms. They're like, oh my God, how dare you say this? It's like, yeah, pretty much. Like, that's fine. It's not my democracy. I don't want your democracy. So you take that and you go play with your toys in your sandbox, and we'll do what we need to do over here. So
I like what you just said, and I'm going to make one comment and throw it over to Blake, because I like, F your democracy. I mean, like, that should almost be like a new battle cry. Like, we're not a democracy. And if you understand forms of government, you never want to be a democracy.
It's two wolves in a sheep deciding what to have for dinner.
Look, I missed that. Sorry, go ahead.
It's two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner.
That's right. There it is. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, no, we are not a democracy. F your democracy. I don't ever want to be a democracy. And I hate to say, and again, for everybody watching or listening, the three of us, independently, we've had this conversation a bunch of times. If you look at Minnesota, for example, we're all Minnesotans. Minnesota is considered a blue state, but that's only because of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth.
Yeah.
The rest of the state is not.
And St. Cloud a little bit.
Well,
that's fair.
But that's maybe a little bit more of a pink area, because
it is. There's a transition point there, because it's still northern and rural enough where there are people that are working hard and understanding what it takes to make a wage.
And that's the same, in a few of the other states where I've lived. Like, so for example, Illinois is not a blue state. Chicago, Joliet, Springfield, those are blue areas, but that's more than enough population base. So, geographically speaking, those cities might make up like all of maybe 1 to 3% of the state, but their population, the larger number of people, maybe that's 80% of the population or 70 or something of that nature. If you add up all the urban areas, they get to decide what the people who live in the other 95% of the state have to do. So that is, to Jeremy's point, and then I'm going to turn over to Blake, or just take a step back and let these guys add some stuff. That is what is being, in my opinion, that is what is being strived for, is to have a certain amount of people be able to dictate what everybody else has to do. That's a democracy. Hey, 51%, that's no, there's still got to be representation. There's, there's way more, there's more to it than simply 51% said this, so the other 49% have to suck it. That's not how a constitutional republic works.
The 51% doesn't get to negate the individual's rights or liberties. That's the whole purpose of why we're a constitutional republic. So,
well, and there's a quote, I'm going to butcher this quote, and I wish I could remember the Spartan that said it, but basically it's if you something along the lines of, if you believe democracy is a good form of government, then try it in your own home first. I mean, that's the thing. As a married individual that's hoping someday to have a family and those sorts of things, I mean, you don't want to run your home as a democracy. You want to ask your children, what do you think is a good idea to do this weekend? Would you like to go to Chuck E. Cheese's or the dentist's? That's not how the real world works. Our decisions must be made. And it falls upon certain individuals to make those hard decisions. And as much as I hate to say it, and that this is really where we're getting down to it, is how does humanity control itself? What is the right amount of control? What is the right amount of freedom? What is, the proper balance? And to this date, the constitutional republic system is the only thing that really has worked. Democracy doesn't work because it's a bunch of guys going, hey, should we steal that bike? Yeah. Well, it's not our bike, but I need to ride over on the other side of town, so I'm gonna take this bike. And that's a problem. But in the same breath, you can take it too far with the totalitarian systems, i.e., communism and fascism and things of these natures, which are the modern iterations of old systems that have been around since the dawn of time. It's really this totalitarianism against freedom. And there's an argument to be made that monarchies aren't the worst thing in the world, but the problem is then it's the genetic lottery throw of the dice. Are you going to get a crazy schizophrenic king, or are you going to actually get the benevolent ruler that happens very occasionally in history? And in those time periods when like the 5 good emperors of Rome was great in history, antiquity. Those 5 emperors, those 5 Caesars, when you were under them, man, it was awesome. But all the other ones were freaking psychotic and terrible and horrible to live on.
And then along comes Caligula and Nero.
And that's and that's why the founders, whatever you may say as far as they operate as individuals and what their core principles were, that's why they settled upon a constitutional republic. That's why we have this system of governments that's been handed down to us. Now, it has changed, especially in the last 100 years. It is not the nation that our founders had originally set up, but there are still vestiges of our nation that are going decently well, that are still working surprisingly better than I would have anticipated at this late stage of our nation. There is still merit here, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the only government form that's ever showed its value in the long run. I mean, in a modern society with everything that's going on, we've had a pretty decent run, and I don't think it's necessarily over yet, but it is going to take some replenishment. So,
without a doubt. And then again, and I think to the great benefit, intelligence, glory, however you want to say it, of our founding fathers, they realized that, and they built that into the founding documents, right? It's there. They realized that, hey, you have to be able to express this and defend yourself, and you are free from the government can't do this and can't do that to you, right? But I do think, again, kind of we've kind of gone a little bit, not too far afield, but we've gone a little bit in that direction, which is, again, we're in a new phase of war. I guess I'm kind of glomming onto this because I never had the chance to really spell it out in the last videos, or the videos when we talked about this. But we're in a new phase of war, and war doesn't always have to be, tank divisions, armor divisions, infantry divisions.
No.
You know, it doesn't have to be kinetic like that. We're clearly in a new state of war right now. And to Blake, to your point, because I think that's a good direction to go. Like, how do we win? How do we overcome this? Because we've been losing some battles, in my opinion. We're losing battles today. Again, the Russell Brand thing. How in the F is this even? Well, or how we started it. The governor of New Mexico, like, how incredibly arrogant of you to think that you have the right to suspend somebody else's constitutional rights and you're just doing it. And we all know that you are intentionally like, well, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to go ahead and influence, because I'm a Karen and I want people to do what I tell them to do, because, you know, I'm a little I'm a Nero, you know, type of guy, you know, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do.
I want to play my violin while the city burns.
Yeah. Well, whether he did that or not, you know, that's speculative. But the point is, I mean, like, that's who he became as an emperor. I mean, that's exactly,
and that's like we were joking around about earlier. That's the thing, is every good story deserves a little bit of embellishment. It's those little points that drive home what was going on at that time period in Roman culture, and we have a lot of these flashpoints throughout history. And I would say one thing that I don't know when this next flashpoint's coming, but this world is shaping up to that right now. I mean, there are so many incredible events that are going on, rumors of wars, economic strife. I mean, you know, Mark, we were talking about this earlier the other day. I went to go get groceries the other day. It was $80 for a single bag. And I bought beef, I bought chicken, I bought potatoes, I bought carrots, I bought some peppers, milk, cheese, and one single candy bar. You know, I mean, that's okay. So I shouldn't have bought that one Creature Comfort candy bar. All right. It would have been $78 then, you know? Hey, was it a Charleston chew? No, it was actually a Toblerone. I really like Toblerones. They're so good. My delivery was bad. I should have done that in a Richard Nixon voice. Get yourself a Charleston chew. And then if anyone knows, from Futurama. I wasn't going to say it. I was going to say, and if anyone knows the reference, you know, make a comment, you know, but Charleston chew, for whatever reason, I love that in Futurama. But
Mark, we've talked a lot about culture in a lot of different things, and I'm going to kind of shift it over to a little bit more of the gun focused community in that topic a little bit, but it's still relevant. But, you know, what I think is interesting is you're starting to also see a culture war within the Second Amendment community, or gun community, if you will, to where fortunately, we have a lot of people from airsoft and gaming and stuff like that. A lot of the younger people are taking an interest in firearms, which I think is great. And thereby extension, you know, being able to learn more about firearms and their functions, but also getting to learn a little bit more about their rights. But we also have people that have been around for a long time that are very antiquated, and some people will call them boomers, and whatever you want to call them is neither here nor there. But what I think is even more interesting is the positions that some companies have taken. And now, you know, and Mark and Blake, you guys might know where I'm going with this, but let's take a look, for instance, like Sig Sauer versus PSA, and why people gravitate more towards PSA to a certain degree versus Sig Sauer right now. Well, because what you're starting to see is this rift in the firearm industry, to where with people waking up, they're like, we want companies that are going to support the people, not shill out to government. And I think that's why, you know, it's funny, because years ago, people were just like, PSA, you know, they kind of put out shit, and it's kind of mediocre and so on. And then, like, as time went on, PSA started to refine a lot more stuff. And then now they're basically just like, no, like, we care more about getting arms into the average individual and supporting those people, as opposed to shilling out the government contracts. And meanwhile, you have SIG and H&K and some of these other big companies that are like, yes, but no, but yes, fuck the people, and we're going to collect the top dollar. And I think that's a really interesting cultural divergence in the 2A area. And I'd like to know what you guys think about that.
I'm going to let Blake respond, but I just want to add to that, because that was a great point, Jeremy. And I'm just going to gloss over this, because I'm not 100% sure exactly the company I'm talking about. And it might be somebody that Jeremy just mentioned, but But yeah, you're absolutely right. Even within that industry, you have people who are doing the whole, it's supposed to be DEI, but I like Bongino's DIE. It's die, the diversity, inclusion, like you even have that happening. It's like, hey, do you not, again, let's throw Budweiser under the bus. Do you not know who your customer base is? And then you're going to go and do this. That's not even. I'm not even going to get into the conversation of whether they should or should not have done it, or if this does or does not exist. That's not the point. Yeah. That's not your customer base. You're selling guns. So on that note, I mean, this is something that Blake, you kind of brought up earlier. Yeah. We even have businesses. I think again, this war is real. Like there's businesses who they don't really care because money isn't really the issue at this point. Control is the issue. Yep. So okay. So we get a bunch
money
of people.
Is secondary.
What is that safe company?
Liberty.
Yeah.
Liberty Safes. Yeah, they just handed over a universal code for one. I mean, that's so it's insane, right? So we find ourselves in all right. It's been a while since I've talked about this. There was a company back in like 2013 to 2015. I think they've since changed their names. Don't quote me on this. You'll have to look it up yourself. But I think they called themselves ATK, and they were based out of Utah. Oh. And they started as this conglomerate that basically went around and they started purchasing firearms companies all around the nation. And I mean, like some pretty decent names. Like I want to say they bought Winchester. I think they might have bought a huge share in like Beretta. They were buying a lot of like percentages in other companies and whatnot. And what happened is they started labeling everything under sort of the same kind of generic standard. All right, we're going to drop quality. We're going to increase production. We're going to increase profit out of it. Fuck the little guy. Don't really care. We just want to make money. And we want to do it through government contracts and bulk sales. And what happened was during this time period, and beyond just ATK, because we saw a lot of the firearms industry in general do the same thing, is they started homogenizing with one another. So like we started seeing like Benelli and Beretta parts very, very, very similar in design. Franke's made on the same machines as these, if I remember correctly. We started seeing, like Kimber 1911s, which for a long time was like the creme de la creme when it came to, hey, I can actually afford this 1911, going from steel mainspring housings to plastic ones made out of like, still a decent polymer, but nothing like it was a fiberglass infused polymer compared to steel. It's not the exact same thing. And then like now I actually will in my shop get 4 or 5 1911s out of custom quote unquote factories where the feed ramps are so sharp that it won't, even feed a hollow point. All right. And this is supposed to be a duty or a carry firearm that you rely your life on. And we see this from pretty much everything across the board, this culture of mediocrity. Yeah. And nobody really takes quality or pride in production, be it from firearms to just general things anymore.
I do.
And you do. And that's the thing that this small business still does. And there is an American revolution that's taking place as far as a quote unquote industrial revolution where you are seeing people striving for this old mentality of American made high quality products. I mean, it was a time when, like our grandparents, or my grandparents, I should say, so like my grandma and grandpa on my mother's side, they were the kids on the bicycles going around and they were collecting the fat from the neighborhood for bomb production during World War II. They were very self-made individuals. And at that time period, when something was produced, okay, you didn't just throw it out and go and consume and buy another thing. You fixed the damn thing and you kept it running. We don't build things like that anymore. And America has fallen away from a manufacturing basis to where we just consume and consume. And we've created a disposable economy. And beyond even just a disposable economy, we've created disposable relationships. No longer is it that the family unit is at the core. No longer is the community at the core. No longer is it, what is the manufacturing capability of our city or what we produce in our state. It's how much money can we make? What are the numbers? And really, where is it we can take this? It's just, we've lost so much of the personality. We've lost so much of the nuclear family. We've lost so much of the pride that we used to have in production of products that I hope we can get it back, but I don't know if we can. And we really see it in the firearm industry a lot. I mean, holy crap, the best shotgun I've seen for general use for just wild, wetlands and upland game use is a Winchester SX3. I had a customer come in about 3 years ago that had shot probably 25,000 rounds through it. He just beat the gas system up to hell. The mainspring of the gas system was in about 17 pieces. It was completely encapsulated in carbon, and he had just the year before it started going to a single shot. And I went, well, there's your problem. And so that is an American-made firearm, and that's fantastic that gun runs that well. But that is that one piece of kernel in the pile of shit that is the American firearms industry nowadays. So, it's just we don't take pride in anything we do anymore. So
well,
Redbeard, just real quickly, just to throw in there, because I'm going to take up a moment of like personal, whatever you want to call it, because I'm running the podcast and I run a business. But I really like everything, Blake, you just said, and I'm just going to. I never like talking about this myself personally, but when somebody else says it, I'm going to jump on it. It's like, dude, pride in so many things is gone, right? And it is. We've become so, and again, whether that's, and that goes even into pride in our Constitution, pride in our constitutional republic, pride in the fact that, hey, we're nice, we're Minnesota nice, and then we get to, as Americans, we get to that point where it's like, all right, you've crossed the line. That's it, mother effer. Now it's time. Like, we're going to come and break all your shit. And that's what we did, and then we would leave, so on so many different levels. And, again, as a small business, when we just did, please everybody go watch the last, what was that? 2 podcasts ago or 1 podcast ago? We were just talking about the future of small business in America. So again, this new form of warfare, and this is, I know I'm kind of on a little bit of a kind of rambling a sec, but it ties in. It's still part of the new form of warfare. We have to, not only do we have to destroy language, take away your ability to defend yourself, change the narrative so defending yourself isn't defending yourself. Now it's actually you're attacking. Like, this guy just came at me with a knife. Well, you should have shot him in the knee. Like, what the F are you talking about? We're in that type of environment, and it's the same thing as small business. I personally, again, I get my own opinion. I think the recent unpleasantness, the whole coof, it was designed to destroy small business, but then because you don't want to have independent. I mean, Jeremy and I have talked about this offline. What is a small business owner? It's somebody who wants to actually do it themselves. They don't want to be beholden to anyone else. They don't want to ask the government's permission. They want to go out there and succeed or fail on their own merits. And that's being beaten out of us, on a multitude of levels. But my final comment is, so I'm not on that property anymore. I'm renting, and where I am right now, the refrigerator just died the other day. It's 33 years old. Like, the property owners got that when they got married. We used to do that. We used to produce stuff like that. It was a 33-year-old refrigerator. It was great, and it just effing died the other day. Like, think about it.
It could probably still be fixed.
Look, the freezer didn't break. The freezer didn't die. So it was just the refrigeration, the main refrigerator compartment. And you're right. That may be a Freon issue, or maybe whatever. But dude, remember when we used to make everything from automobiles, and back to your point, Blake, you were talking about even guns. Like you mentioned Kimber. Dude, back in the day, I wanted a Kimber like there was no tomorrow. Because it was such a well-made precision tool, and just sexy, and it just everything about it worked and flowed and felt good, and now what do you get?
And we're seeing that in everything, man. So like, I had a customer come in just not too long ago that had it was a Rock Island Armory. I want to say is the model the TP9, or the TP10 or whatever. It's a 10 millimeter 1911 in essence. And it comes from factory with an RMR on it. And he had shot 3 rounds through it. It wouldn't feed hollow points. The RMR would not dial in because they did not cut the slide proper from factory, so that he was, even when you're all the way to the bottom, the thing was still 7 inches high and right in the target.
Oh my God.
Like, it was just terrible. Now, granted, they took care of it. All right. They're fixing it right now pro bono, but that shouldn't happen in the first place.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
No. Go ahead, Jeremy. I know
Well,
you've got. I just got to caution you.
it's
Don't get too geeked out here. I know you want to just like
no,
start
it's
talking nomenclatures
you
and
know,
barrel twists.
well, we'll get to that. But because it's going to factor into the individual in addressing problems, and I actually do want to get back to the community thing and helping each other and also like that Minuteman-esque type thing, because the gunsmithing realm, I do feel like factors into that. And Blake, you spoke to my heart, because Mark, how many times have I emphasized that in different episodes? But when you look at companies, and I do agree with you, with both of you, in the idea that there is a sense of mediocrity there. And when you look at kind of where a company like, and I hate to keep picking on them or bringing them up, but when you look at where Palmetto State Armory started, and then as they progressed, like where they're at now, a lot of people are just like, oh, like they're not, they're just kind of like their newest one. They just basically made like an SR25 M110 clone, and it's like, okay, and like you're literally upset about the fact that they made a clone that's affordable and functions well. Like, you're upset about the fact that you can get something that's affordable. You're upset about the fact that this company also does better than some companies when it comes to suggestion and listening to their customers and trying to at least address or identify or rectify issues. Now, I get that a lot of people like to pick on PSA, but to some degree, like I've told people, like, look, are they going to have issues? Absolutely. I don't know any company that doesn't have an issue somewhere down the line. You see it with FNs, you see it with Glocks, you see it with a lot of companies, albeit nobody will admit to that because they're fanboys about shit. But in the end of the day, like, things do happen. But what's important to me is, does the company listen to you and at least try to rectify and address the issues? And look, that if they do, they give a shit about you as a company, and they give a shit about what their product is. You're not buying a PSA because it's the highest tier, because PSA doesn't admit that they're the highest tier. They're like, look, we want to put out a good firearm that the working person can afford and have some level of standards. Whereas HK or FN is just like, we don't feel like you should have an MP5. Okay, like, but why not? Like, you as a company actually have a voice for your customers, and you don't want to do it because you like the government contracts. And so what you're starting to see is people are shifting, and they're using their wallets to some degree of who they want to buy through, whether it's a smaller business or something like that. It's not quite where it should be, but it is getting there.
But it's getting there, Redbeard.
Yeah.
And as I turn this over to Blake, I just want to capture something you just said, and kind of accentuate it a little bit, whether Blake runs with this or not. But that's exactly it. I mean, lines are being drawn, and there are big companies, again, whether it's Budweiser, whether it's the companies that Jeremy just mentioned, whether it's others who are basically coming out and saying, Jeremy, and I think you nailed it. It's all about the government contracts. It isn't about like, hey, I'm providing.
If Budweiser could get a government contract, they would.
Well, look, do you think there's something going on behind the scenes? I mean, look, they're not even worried about it. A normal business would be in total freaking panic mode. Like, holy shit, I just screwed up, and I just lost all my.
So I think Aero Precision kind of realized that when all that shit happened in Washington. I'm just throwing that out. But
well, I think this kind of goes back to what I was talking about, and to bring it around circle from the original question you had of this conversation, Mark, was about New Mexico, and that lady and I had said I think she fell on her sword. We're seeing this with a lot of things. Anheuser-Busch being a huge example. What multi-billion-dollar corporation, the number one beer company in the United States, is willing to do something so out of left field for their clientele that they know is going to absolutely decimate their brand, probably permanently, willing to run someone like Dylan Mulvaney and then fall on their sword, knowing now they're what the last I heard 13th biggest brewery in the United States. I mean, Dos Equis is beating them. They're the number one, I think.
No, I think it's Modelo.
Or Modelo.
I think
That's
it's
what it is.
Modelo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's
So
Modelo.
that's insanity. So why are these huge companies, be it from your SIGs to your Bush or your Anheuser-Busch to your various other organizations that are out there, why are they sacrificing the credibility that they have for these government contracts? And again, I think it goes back to this divergent pathway. It's like we're all throwing as much money out of the window as we possibly can and then jumping out before the flames get us while the high rise is burning down. I think everybody knows that as far as the current iteration of our nation goes, the game is up. That there are cards that are being called in for whatever purpose, be it the national pogroms that we're seeing like they did in China with trying to demoralize individuals that wince against the Communist Party, but they're doing it on a national scale with things like people's favorite beer company or whatever it is, or their firearms companies saying, we don't think you should have these guns. That we don't believe that these firearms should be in the hands of civilians. It's these clear party lines that are being drawn, and it's on such a party lines is, I guess, really the wrong term, because it's not as we as Americans view party lines with the left or the right or anything like that. It's that free citizen versus the citizen of the totalitarian state. So
I really want to, Jeremy, this is total audible, throwing it out there right now. And for anyone who's, watching, listening, leave us a comment and tell us what you think. We did an episode, Redbeard. I can't remember how long ago it was. I'm having so much fun. I'm not even joking.
Yeah.
This is a lot of fun, but we did that dirty civilian episode. I think Blake needs to come back and we need to revisit that question, because that hasn't gone away, Redbeard. That's still that there's more and more knuckleheads out there talking about this. And especially, again, because I personally think it's all part of a new form of warfare. And again, I can put these poster children up there. Here's a guy who used to be in the military. Here's a guy who's, a sheriff or a police, whatever, you guys don't need this stuff. Like, who in the F are you to tell me what I can and cannot do? And the saddest thing to me is that's who we used to be as Americans. What happened to that?
Yeah.
Where's that John Wayne attitude? Like that frontiersman attitude, that I'm out here on my own. I don't need you to tell me what I can and cannot do. I don't need you to help me. I'm going to figure this out. Or to Blake's point, when you guys were talking about this, I'm going to know my neighbors and we're going to figure it out. And we're going to work together and do this.
Yeah. I think part of it is so many people will do anything that they have to be able to maintain the creature comforts that's given to them by the system. When you ask, I hate to pick on Zoomers here, but when you ask a Zoomer, hey, where does your meat come from? And they go wrapped in cellophane at the grocery store. Like, they don't process the fact that was a living, mammal, a bovine walking out on a prairie, eating grass, and it had to be killed and butchered and processed and shipped to your supermarket. It's this disconnect, and they will so desperately defend the system that provides these creature comforts for them. And we're all at fault here. I love watching Stargate SG-1 streaming it at night on Amazon. It's fantastic. I really enjoy doing that. But I would trade it
before he goes any further. I apologize to everyone who's watching for bringing on a guest who likes Stargate SG-1. Go ahead.
Favorite show ever. Hell yeah.
Continue, sir. Kind sir.
But that's the thing, is we're all just we're so used to our comfort. It's I don't remember who said it, but we all are wearing chains. It's just the fact that we like the chains we're wearing. It's the entertainment and the media, the fast food, the nightlife, the plethora of alcohol and pornography and all of these sorts of things. It's this dopamine, and we are just Skinner boxes, and we're very programmable. And again, we've talked about him a bit, but Noah Harari is another example that he even talks about how man is a programmable machine, and that it's a simple matter of us putting these electronic stimuli into them to be able to get them to do what they want. He even goes so as far as to say the God used to be above the clouds, and now we brought it down to our level where the cloud is Google and Amazon. Yeah, I mean the absolute fucking hubris of these people.
Well,
two quick questions or two quick comments
Yeah.
because Jeremy, I know you're going to run with this just real quickly.
Yep.
Another great line from the actual book Starship Troopers applies to everything you just said right there, Blake. We've forgotten so many things. We take so much stuff for granted, and at the end of the day, just on a personal plug, the small business thing, and again, Amazon, Walmart, all these places that didn't get shut down during the coup, but all these small businesses, and restaurants who were destroyed by it. I think that still, to my ultimate argument, when we're talking about guns and things, comes into this is the reality that's taking place around us. People are having this liberty, this sense of awareness, and like, no, I get to make my decisions for myself and my family, not you, not the state, not the government, freedom. And then I guess to that extent, as I turn over to Jeremy, and freedom isn't free. I mean, and life isn't easy, but to Blake's point, we're all being conditioned to believe that it's, I should get it in 2 days. Like, no, it's handcrafted, and there's like 100 people in the line in front of you. Like, and this isn't some slave labor fucking factory. No. Well, why not? Then you suck and you're evil. You're like, what the hell? So to Blake's point, this is part of that war that's taking place, and and defending yourself is being beaten out of us as well. It's being stripped away from us. Whenever somebody defends themselves, they're suddenly they're the villain. For defending themselves or their community. All right, Redbeard, that's all I had to say, sir.
Well, and I'm going to hit back on the community aspect of things too. It kind of getting away from like the business portion of the gun industry, because there's more than obviously just businesses in the gun industry. I consider the gun industry is being anybody that has anything to do with firearms for the most part. In terms of maybe like a professional or an associative type of thing, whether it's like YouTube or whatever, because like it's such a large apparatus at this point. And it, and Blake, I brought this up just briefly, but like, there's so many companies out there, and I think a lot of different gunsmiths out there that are, they're kind of disagreeable to the point of like, oh, well, like I don't want people to know like how to do this because then I'll lose business. Okay, well, here's my perception of that. Like, look, first off, we should be helping our fellow man, right? Which means if we can get somebody to be somewhat self-sustaining in terms of, basic maintenance and repair of their firearms, why would you not advocate for that? That was literally a skill that our founders and the people of their time had to know.
It was to be expected, actually.
Well, right, and it's like and that's part of that. That's part of that well-regulated, not legislatively, but just the fact that you can
regulated in the sense that the founders meant to use that terminology.
Exactly, and so it's like and when we were talking about that, I think you and I both agreed on the idea of like, no, like if you're good at what you do and you know enough and you offer enough, you're not going to lose business because there's still stuff that people aren't going to want to do. And there's actually quite a bit that people don't want to do. But I know guys that know how to tear their AR apart, but they don't want to do it to clean their firearm. Even at a very base field stripping level, a lot of people just don't want to do it. They're just like, hey, I would rather provide you the work, even though I know how to do this, because I just don't have the time. I just don't have the interest. And it's like, look, there's this idea to where you have people in the industry that I think are so terrified that, you mentioned gatekeeping back when we were talking on the phone, like that, very much so. Like people do gatekeep, and it's like, why? Like if we're really as concerned about liberty as we say we are, why would we gatekeep self-reliance from our peers and the people in our community? Like, again, if you're good at what you do, you're not going to have to worry about business. If you're a personable person and you have good character, people will naturally gravitate to you because they like you and they want to see you succeed. So it's like, to me,
well, and don't forget, because you're also skilled, you're providing a quality service.
Yep.
You
Yeah,
know,
and
I'm gonna throw my
Yeah.
my hat or my 2 cents in the ring. You know, like,
Yeah.
I hear people, "Well, just sow this and just sow that." Yeah, you can just sow some stuff, and you know, and but that's not gonna get you.
It'll be just so.
Product you need.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's that same thing. And I think that goes into every facet of life. The one thing I did want to just comment on real quickly, Jeremy, is, and I'm not going to, a matter of fact, I don't even remember who this guy was, but, you know, I'm making a product right now for a 1022, a kind of a takedown. And some people were asking me some questions. And again, you know, I don't know everything. I mean, like, okay, so I start looking at some videos, and here's a guy doing a YouTube video. And to Jeremy's exact point, he's talking about this stock, and he, you know, and he's probably, maybe he's just making up because YouTube, you know, doesn't like guns and anything. Well, shit, we might get like, you know, throttled just simply for that, having the word guns in the title, but he doesn't have his gun here. And his explanation for why he doesn't actually have the weapon, he just has the stock, is, to Jeremy's point, I just brought it to my gunsmith or my armor, where he says something of that nature, for cleaning. And I wanted to use that opportunity to show you the stock. So to Jeremy's point, this guy didn't know how to do that stuff himself, or he had the money because he has a good enough job or whatever. And this is a technique, and there's nothing wrong with it. And he just doesn't have the time. Because when you said that, Jeremy, that resonated with me. Like way back in the day, I had some money, you know, when I was working for the agency. What I didn't have was time. I didn't have time. I was barely ever back in the States. I barely had, you know, and if I had to fly to Illinois or drive and then hang out with you guys, and, you know, because I only have 7 days, you know, you're like, time is what I didn't have. So I was willing to pay. I remember even saying this to a friend once, like, well, he's like, well, I got this. I'm like, okay, I'll hire a local kid to mow your lawn, and then we're going to put that stuff in the dry cleaning. You know, don't worry about, you know, because I've got 48 hours to hang out with you. So we're going to go get drunk and tell fucking tall tales. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
And I had the cash to do it. So to Jeremy's point, there are two different ways of doing it. You know, there are techniques, but I knew how to do all those things. I could have ironed the guy's clothes. I could have mowed his lawn, you know, but it's like, no, see where we're kind of going, that Blake, does that make a little bit of sense? Or did I take Jeremy's great story and distort it?
No comment. No.
hey, just on that note right there, just because we're talking about guns and things, Jeremy and I were talking about this just bullshitting earlier today. And it's like, dude, there was a time when men used to be able to give each other shit like that, and you would laugh about it. Like, you know, when somebody throws you under the bus or says something about your beard or whatever. Like, I'm really surprised you guys haven't ganged up on me and started saying, you know, look how small.
I actually like
Mark's
it.
Beard is.
It's been a while since I've seen you have a beard.
Like your guys's, you know, come on.
Yeah.
But it's
been a while since I've seen you wear it, though. It looks good. So hey, there you go.
Well, thank you. But to that point, you know, you just busted my balls right there, right? You know, that's another aspect of, again, language and culture that's being taken away from us, as Jeremy and I were talking about.
Absolutely, it is. You know, so yeah, I guess, I don't know, man. The industry screwed up. Everything's screwed up. You know, and that's the biggest problem is I don't want to go off too far from what you guys were just talking about, but everything is twisted right now. And it is just a matter of, I don't know. Honestly, at this particular moment, I'm going to need Jeremy, if you don't mind taking over for a second, because I'm actually kind of at a stall point. So,
Hey, are you just getting old, Blake, or what's
I might just be getting old, man. It's been a long day. We've been just for everyone to know, we're actually in the process of moving the shop right now, and we've been burning the candle at both ends. So it's just like everything else in this world. It all takes time. It all takes just an absolute monumental time to take care of things, and it's in the world where we are right now, where, you know, like I said, the groceries are more expensive. The finding good labor to be done, and actually somebody that understands the fact that, hey, it's going to take some time to do this product. You know, it all is just taxing because people don't understand what reality is anymore. Right. And that's the biggest thing, is this disconnect of, well, I'm used to Amazon getting it to my front door in 2 days. Right. You know, why aren't you providing the same service? You know, but okay, that's fine. I'll provide the same service, but it's really a polished turd. You know, do you really want to just pay for a polished turd? Oh.
Hey, before we come over to Jeremy, I'm just going to kind of shift things a little bit. So just a preface for everybody. I think let's give everybody last comments on what we're talking about, and then I'm gonna move us into a different direction. A little Q&A, try to give something back to everybody who's still with us or listening or watching at this point in time. You guys know what I'm talking about, like, hey, a couple points. But one thing that I think Blake just said, and I'm just gonna give a plug for my friend and a guy who runs a business that I do business with, and I only do business with people that I think are worth doing business with. It's, Blake, as you were just kind of saying, like, dude, I know you, and Blake hustles, right? Like, and if you're watching or listening to this, you're probably a person who hustles and works your ass off too. So just trying to be and make a positive statement. Yeah, there's ups and downs. Shit happens, bad things, good things. It's life. It isn't supposed to be easy. And but I think if nothing else, for those people who are out there doing it, hold your head up high if you're out there working your ass and hustling. And this guy right here works his ass off and hustles. I mean, plain and simple, so yeah.
That's awesome.
But that's the thing too. It goes to quality. Like we've talked about it this whole night is this mediocrity we're seeing in the firearms industry, and we're really seeing across the board right now. We used to, as Americans, take pride in what we did. And everything that we did, be it from our home life to our professional life. And that day and age is long gone. No longer is a handshake from a man mean anything anymore. I hate to say it, but that's the God's honest truth. And this whole landscape has changed drastically, especially in the last half decade. And I think one of the biggest things is what we as free citizens, dangerous but peaceful free citizens, have to realize is the rules of the game have changed. And we're playing a different game now than we were a decade ago. And it's going to really rely on people to bring back craftsmanship, to learn some skills and find out who your local community is and who in that has skills that can help augment yours and to help protect yours. Because as much as I hate to say it, the time for being able to do something on the national level right now is really gone without something we don't want to really do. So it's going to be affecting change in a local community and in your local area. That's the one thing we can do to try to make this world better right now. So,
and to that point, Blake, I've said this a couple different times. I feel like community, in like the smaller realm of things, it's something that I've echoed quite a bit myself. And I feel like that's really where it's at. And especially when you have a lot of people that they talk a lot about that Minuteman rule and especially as it pertains to firearms. And I think, I think the biggest issue that I see, and this is going to be a mild rabbit hole, but here's the thing is there's a lot of people that are very influenced by social media as it pertains to like firearms and where they feel that their role of being a Minuteman is. And I really want to kind of see your side of this as well, especially from another like gunsmith perspective, because what I found is a lot of guys, and me and Mark have talked about this, they'll see a guy run like a Delta Force rifle, but they don't understand, like,
just like, real quickly, just so no one misconstrues what you just said. What Jeremy sees, they'll see some picture of somebody in the military, whether it's Delta or a SEAL Team 6 or something like that.
Like a high speed setup.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to, just so somebody would think that was the name of
tactical badasses.
Right. Yeah. So like they'll see a guy that's super kitted out, and they'll have like a high speed like rifle setup or whatever the case is, and and that's fine. Like, don't get me wrong, like if somebody wants to have it because they think it's cool, like, dude, like, more power to you. But in terms of like the Minuteman thing, and especially if you're gonna come at this from a community level and actually coordinate efforts and stuff like that to get people together to kind of help foster this sense of community and be able to bolster our defense against tyranny, right? A lot of people that are fixated on having this, this fighting rifle, I think they get it misconstrued to this idea of like, oh, well, this is what they're using, so this must make sense, instead of people being like, does this make sense for me? Does it make sense in the grand scheme of things? And it's not just a rifle, like it's handguns. It's a lot of other different aspects of the firearm that you're buying for the use of whether it's self-defense or defense against tyranny or whatever the case is. Like, look, like, do you feel like there's way too many people out there that see something and they're like, this is just going to transfer all of the skills, if you will, and I want you to set this up. And as gunsmiths, we kind of are, I think we have our own opinions of like, okay, like, yeah, that I get it, but it doesn't really make sense. But at the same time, we're just like, I'll set your rifle up, dude, but I'm not going to tell you you're going to be like,
the super high speed,
operator.
do everything, awesome, two-way range
like,
operator, badass.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess the crux of what I'm trying to say is like, do you feel, instead of people having like an SPR, special purpose rifle, do you feel the advent of a general purpose rifle is something that people should take into consideration, especially if they're looking to fulfill that Minuteman role, as opposed to, like a recce rifle? Like
100%.
Before you go any further, Redbeard, that's please remember that, because we're going to talk about this more in the future. That's a great point right there. Again, something that's general purpose. And you and I, again, for everybody watching, listening, Jeremy and I have been talking about this on a personal level about a couple other issues, behind the scenes, just our normal conversations. And I'm glad you brought that up. I totally forgot about that. That's a great point right there. Like, do you need to have an X, Y, or Z, or should you just have a 1, 2, or 3? Because what is it that you're really trying?
And it's not saying you can't have a long range rifle.
Absolutely.
Anyways, Blake.
So
go ahead, Blake.
It's a really super individual thing. I'm going to say that first and foremost. Is there, have you spent more time behind the trigger of a shotgun, more time behind the trigger of a semi-auto or a bolt gun? But I will stand here and tell you, I would be personally, in our local environment where we are and everything, I'm way more terrified of my customers that are shooting Mauser 98 Carl Gustavs and 6.5 speed from friggin' 120 years ago than I am any guy running a 5.56 and an AR.
Yeah.
So,
but to your point, so I'll throw myself under the bus. Dude, I've run that 5.56, that M series platform, that AR platform for so long. It's like second nature. And and you guys, I'm not going to say this out loud on this podcast, but you guys know what I'm talking about. There's things that I'm like, it's like a comfortable suit or pair of shoes or something. You're just like, oh yeah,
you just slide right back into it.
Yeah. And then there's, but you guys actually, and most people watching, listening, know a lot more about a whole lot of other platforms than I do, because that's not my thing, right? That's not my background. That's not, and you kind of stick or stay with what you know, and that's my comfort zone. So to that,
and
that's your guys'
that's
point,
why,
right?
Yeah, and that's why I said it's super individualistic, because I know some guys, they can run a shotgun and they can run that thing like a freaking typewriter. And I know other guys that, when it comes to the old control round feed actions and things like that, they are a tack driver and they can move quietly and quickly because they've been stalking animals for years and years. So, I really, what I tell people when I take a concealed carry or give a concealed carry class or something of that mindset, I usually tell people a couple of things. I say, well, I tell them a lot of things because it's a class and we're in it for a long time, but there's a few big things I'm going to kind of touch on right now. One is, I personally am a believer of shooting the largest caliber that you're comfortable and proficient with. And if that is a 380 auto and that's what you're comfortable with, but you're damn good with it, great. Use that 380 auto. Hell, even if it's a 22 long rifle, as long as you're doing the work. But if it's a 45, I'm going to go with the 45 because I know if I tag somebody a little off to the left and I hit their shoulder instead, that's completely out of commission. So there's something to be said about the caliber that you're carrying. Now, as far as a longer gun
just
goes,
one quick second before you go further. For anyone who's watching this, and if somebody says, "Oh, Blake, that's bullshit. That's overrated," or blah blah blah. I'm just going to throw something out. So when you go into competitive shooting, and if you're shooting a competition, and maybe it's an open, and you can carry and shoot whatever caliber you want to shoot. To Blake's point, if you shoot outside of the A box with a 45, you're going to get scored higher than if you shoot outside of the A box with a 9mm. So I'm just
simply because of the transition of what would happen,
the damage it would cause. Exactly. That's exactly why it's scored that way. So I just want to throw that out there, just in case there's somebody who's like, "Oh, that's blah blah blah." I'm like, No, there's a reason for that, and that's true.
You know, and that's the thing. It's why you can go back to the old argument of a 9 or a 45. It's old as time. Do I carry the 9 because of the round capacity? Do I carry the 45 because of the stopping capacity or stopping power? I always go with I carry the 10 millimeter because I get the best of both worlds. So
Sorry, you froze up there just a little bit, but we could hear you. But
I basically just said, that's why I carry a 10 over a 9 or a 45 because it's the best of both worlds. You strike that balance. And as far as the individualistic thing goes, though, a semi-automatic AR and 5.56, all right, that's a very proficient firearm. I've taken deer with that cartridge before. You can do a lot of work with it. You can reach out to decent distances with it. But at the end of the day, for certain applications, I'd rather have a 308. And that's one of the other things I'll tell my gunsmithing customers or my concealed carry clientele is, it used to be we'd be able to get about any ammunition off the shelf at any time you wanted to. That's really changed over the last 10 years, and it's really changed in the last 5 years, ever since the COVID times. And basically what happened is I tell people, this is the best I can understand in the industry, is that a lot of these big manufacturers, Winchester, Remington, Federal, they'd forecast out X amount of years in the future. So 3 to 5 years, they'd forecast out the amount of ammunition that they were producing. So like, let's say, for instance, they were producing 375 H&H, and they go, we're going to sell X amount of this over the course of 5 years. So they build all 5 years worth of that ammunition, and then they retool their machines, and they go on to 300 Win Mag, and then they forecast out that, and they go through and they cycle their machines and load what ammunition that they can. Well, what happened with COVID is everybody came in and they bought every round of ammunition they could possibly get their hands on, not realizing they're buying 3 to 5 years out in the future of these obscure quote unquote cartridges and ammunition. So then what the companies realize is, hey, holy shit, we're making hand over fist with our NATO cartridges, 9 millimeter, 40, 45, 12 gauge, 308, 223. We're selling these like the cats come home. So why even bother retooling our machine when we know we can sell? Because not only do the U.S. military and the NATO militaries around the world utilize this, so do most civilians. So then what happened is we've hit this kind of crux where you can't get what I don't even like to call oddball or wildcat ammunition anymore. It really standard stuff, but it's not available. So what I tell people is if you really want to kit out for whatever is to come, quote unquote, whether it's civil strife, whether it's, there's been a natural disaster, whether it's just the fact the power is out and, you've just got to defend your family, stick with things that are NATO cartridges. You're always going to be able to scavenge 9, 40, 45, 223, 5.56, 308, and 12 gauge. Yes, it's a pretty limited number, but you can damn near do anything you want to with those cartridges. So,
and if I can, just Redbeard real quickly. Yeah. So we got to have Blake on again. We got to do this again because there's 100%. That point of the conversation. I wish he would have been here when we were teaching the class, gear bags go and get in there because that is a whole, that's part of your decision-making process and how you're evaluating your situation. Great. Like you even just kind of did it. And I don't know if you did it intentionally. You said 9, 40, and 45. I don't know if you just did that by order of, ease to, these are the 3 best cartridges you're going to find, but you're going to find way more 9 than you are 45. I don't know if you just did it that way intentionally.
Absolutely.
But
I really should have started with 22.
All right, Redbeard, I just wanted to throw that out there because I think we should revisit that in the future.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And something I want to kind of remind people of too. Again, Blake, you might have seen this in passing with customers, but I feel like there's a lot of people that are very antiquated in their assumptions when it comes to firearms and ammunition as well. And what I mean by that is you have people that, and I know Mark's going to give me shit about it, and I hope he does, but you have people that look at like the AK platform and they're like, okay, well, like these are hammered shit. It's like, okay, but what are you basing that off of? If you're looking at the AKM or the 101s or the 74s from 1970, they're probably not going to stack up. But what people aren't seeing is, especially with American manufacturers, which are putting out pretty solid AKs now, you're starting to see 500-600 yard shots with a pretty decent level of accuracy with these things. And it's not just AKs, it's literally any rifle made today. The technology and how the barrels are done and the components that are used are so far ahead of our time, from what they were in the 1970s, that it's almost, you can't almost make the comparison. And it's the same with ammunition. to the
Well,
point
so
where,
before you go down that rabbit
yeah,
hole, let me just address that.
yep,
So I do have a comment. I mean, you're absolutely
yep,
right. Like, and I do
yep,
love giving you shit about AKs, but you know,
yep,
that's just, you know, guys giving each other shit.
yep,
But
yeah, 100%.
with the modern advances
Yeah,
in metallurgy and
it's
again now
amazing,
And
honestly.
then American companies
Yeah,
making, as opposed to a communist, you know,
hmm,
who doesn't give a shit, right?
To
Look,
take care in the
I,
craftsmanship.
so without getting
yep,
into it, maybe we save this for the next time. You can
yeah,
make an argument, you know, about the ballistic coefficients of the round and the
yeah,
kinetic energy, you know, versus a 5.56, you know, or a 3. Let's save that. But I'm look, I like giving you a
yeah,
hard time, but I'm not going to argue with you.
yeah.
But I'm going to
Even look
actually
at how far
take
ARs have
I'm going to
come.
take Blake's
Yeah,
stance in this, because this is my
yeah,
stance as well. Hey, dude, if you can run an AK better than you can run
100%.
a
Yep.
stoner, then run a friggin' AK.
If
If
you
you
can run
can
an
run a
SKS,
wheel gun,
better do it.
yeah,
Like,
if
Yeah,
you run a
right.
wheel
Yeah,
gun better
yeah,
than you run a semi-auto, then run a wheel gun. You know, if a
right.
and that's
22 long rifle, you know, in a handgun, dude,
Exactly.
you could
Yep.
be a tack driver with
Yeah.
that. And I'm here to tell you, you put a bunch of those in the brain pan, it's still going to have the same result as the A box. So,
Right.
and
you know,
that's
again, everybody's different, and these are just tools in the toolbox. That's
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
Jeremy, yeah, you're right. And I do love giving you shit about it, but
Yeah.
I'm not
No.
going to argue that
But
because,
it's in
yeah,
general
yeah.
too. When you really evaluate it, you know, AKs, ARs aside, like, dude, you're seeing accuracy out of firearms today that honestly, I
But in all
think is,
fairness, Western, not Russian or Soviet bloc, you know,
well, and
but
so to
Western.
be fair though, to be fair, if you go over to Slovenia, like they've over there,
Okay,
and some of the manufacturers over in some of those countries have
sure.
done fantastic work, and it's like, dude, like,
Once they were able to break free of the orbit of the former
right.
Soviet
Well,
Union.
and
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I'll give you
and
that.
I think it's pretty incredible. But at the time too, you know, it's like
Well,
when
hang
you
on
look at
one quick
even,
second.
yeah,
I wasn't poo
yep,
pooing you, and I don't want to make
yep,
everybody think that way. I actually want to give props where props are due. I mean, dude, Kalishnikov. I mean, like, come on, man.
more theaters
Can
of
any of the
war
rest
than
of us come
anywhere
up with a
else.
weapons platform?
yeah,
You know, that thought. I mean, dude, it's kind of
right,
genius. You know, I'm gonna do my
Well,
Western
that's
bias. I really like my stoner, but yeah, you know, dude, I
yeah,
mean, you know,
so that's actually the beauty of the AK.
yeah,
It is its simplicity and
yeah,
hmm,
and the fact that it can be made in any
yeah,
shithole,
yeah,
desert or friggin' tundra anywhere in the world with
yeah,
some basic freaking tools. It's the fact that it's been utilized
hmm,
in more theaters of war than any other platform in human history as far as kinetic firearms go. The
yeah,
AK may be a piece of shit. What shines about it is the fact that
yeah,
it is a piece of shit. That's what
yeah.
makes it amazing.
Well,
It's the fact
right,
that they don't really work great until they've been shot with the carboniest, grossest Eastern Bloc
yeah,
ammo possible. And yes, there has been a modern resurgence in
yeah,
quality production out of it. But what
yeah,
makes the Kalashnikov great is that it is a piece of shit.
right. Well, and it's great that you say
hang on. I
that
just got to
because
hang on. Let's just let everybody ponder what Blake just said. What makes it great is that it is a piece of shit.
yeah.
All right, all right.
Well,
I'm
and
still trying to digest that,
so
and I don't
here's,
mean literally because it's a
yeah,
piece
so
of shit,
here's,
but you know, whatever. All right.
and here's the thing though, is like if you look at all of the rifles, whether it's an AR, whether it's a 1911, whether it's an AK, whether it's a K98, right? All of these, all of these firearms to some degree, were built to fulfill a role. And
Amen.
so when you go to compare these firearms, like a lot of people like to do, like I'd say a Glock versus a 1911, or an AK versus an AR. What people are also missing is they're designed to fulfill different roles, and
Exactly.
so
Yes.
that's like
Tools in a
that's
toolbox.
the,
Even
yeah,
within
and
its
that's
own
the nature of,
platform.
right, and that's the thing. It's like, so it's kind of funny because it's like the Ford versus Chevy thing, except they're designed to fill both roles, but yet they still get the same JD Power Award, which I don't understand. But I digress. Like the point is it's like we have to, like, when you go to pick a platform, you have to kind of understand and get somewhat intimate with it in what it's good for and understand what it's not good for. And it's the same thing with ammunition. You know, like there's been a lot of advancements with ammunition, a lot to where it can make some calibers fairly competitive with their better or their worse. But in the end of the day, like there's always going to be some form of an advancement, and things can develop to where they can get better. and where they can stay competitive, but they're designed for different things. And so that's an important thing to remember. So
hey,
Absolutely.
can I just throw something out, Blake, before you respond?
Yeah.
I'll throw it out for everybody. Well, two things. One, just give everybody a heads up. We should be kind of wrapping this up.
Yep.
We're already at 2 hours and 20 minutes, and we do have a tendency we could just keep talking all night long.
Yeah.
So instead of keep talking all night long, let's actually agree to have let's do another episode.
Yeah.
Of this.
100%. Yeah.
And then okay, so then that's my follow-up. Then so if we do another episode, then actually let's make the next episode a little bit more technical. Let's actually start talking about some more weapons related things. And Jeremy, you just made me think of this, and I don't know if you saw me writing it down. Let's do what you just said, and let's go back and let's use Carver. Let's plug some things in, because I love what you said. Whether it's a Glock versus a Smith, or whether it's an AK versus whatever, whoever
that's
makes
the
it.
thing. It can even be a Glock versus a Glock. I mean, Mark, look at what a turnkey Glock is, right? What you buy, and then what can be converted through a beaver strap or a beaver tail extension and a backstrap reduction and serrations on a slide. I mean,
it's like plastic surgery for guns.
Exactly. There's a lot of change that can happen. So
okay. So could you say that whole thing again? Because we're all laughing and talking over it, but I think that was a really solid point, because it isn't just necessarily HK versus
it can be Glock versus Glock.
Yeah, even internally. Yeah, and Jeremy kind of already hinted at this a little bit. Once you start learning more about this, and again, you start adapting some other technologies and components to what works for you, and you can make that a better tool. So Blake, say that again, please.
Well, and that's the thing. It can be a Glock versus a Glock. It can be a factory Glock out of the box, or it can be something that's had a backstrap reduction, a beaver tail extension, serrations cut into it, an RMR cut onto the slide, trigger job done. And those two guns are completely different firearms. And even out of that, that's more of something that's set up for somebody that wants to use it on a two-way range. You can also set it up to be something more like a competition gun with a long slide on it, where really you're going out and you're shooting at longer distances. And then compare that from a 1911 that's set up to shoot at 100 yards compared to a Glock that shoots 100 yards. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, gunsmithing and firearms in general, the idea behind it is we want to take as many variables off the shoulders of the firearm and put them on the shoulders of the shooter. We want the gun to work properly. And realistically, and I tell this is the third point I was going to make about my concealed carry classes that I do, is I tell people, I said, yes, this might be the pistol that you carry every day in and day out. All right. But that doesn't necessarily mean, God forbid, you find yourself having to defend yourself, that's what you get to defend yourself with. So the more platforms that you can become proficient with across the board, whether it's a side-by-side or a single shot shotgun, all the way up to a semi-automatic, to a bolt gun, to, I mean, I don't even give a shit. If you get a chance to shoot a volcanic, shoot a volcanic. You should learn as many different platforms as you possibly can, because we don't know what we will be able to defend ourselves with.
And to that point, that's also awesome. Practicing and sharpening your brain, your mind, because to your point, you may not even have the time to go, because most people aren't carrying open.
Right.
Well, let's save that for next time too. But
that's a whole conversation right there.
Yeah, exactly. And so here in northern Minnesota, you're wearing multiple layers of clothes. You're carrying concealed. How many people actually practice? So to Blake's point, you might be looking at actually hands, or creating distance, or looking at some other
or environmental control.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a really great point right there that you bring up.
And if I can just piggyback on that real quick, I think this is the one area, and it's funny because when I was going through my school, and I'm sure you probably heard this going through your school back in the day too, Blake, but one of the questions that you have to kind of like lead into sometimes, especially if there's like a failure to like generally cycle, whether it's like to eject or whatever, it's like, did you actually like did you actually like get a good purchase on your weapon, or like or like or are you just like, are you holding it like a bitch, like
that's a hard thing to explain to customers.
And for everybody listening, Jeremy doesn't drink alcohol. He's been drinking like water and shit, and he just Blake and I think Blake's had a drink. I've had a drink. Jeremy just threw that out there. That was not alcohol speaking. That was Jeremy speaking right there.
He's spot on. So what we call it in the industry is limp wristing.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, for every action there has to be an equal and opposite reaction, which means that if we're shooting a semi-automatic pistol, take a 1911 being one of the biggest culprits of this, if we do not provide the impotence into our wrist while we're shooting it so that there is something that the slide can recoil against, it's not going to have enough push against it to actually cycle the next round into battery and allow you to do your follow-up shot, i.e. limp wristing. Well, how does one explain that to a customer going, yeah, you had a bitch grip? I mean, so, you know, and that's the other one we joke around about too, is sometimes you'll get a customer that comes and goes, man, I don't know what it is that I'm doing, but it just won't shoot. And you look at it and you go, oh, the dumb fucker's got the safety on. So you go in the back and you scrub the safety up a little bit and you come and you go, oh, there was some dirt in your safety right here. It's working good now. And you show them how to do it. So then that's one of the big things is how do you show your customer how to become better without belittling them? Because at the end of the day, I don't want to belittle anyone, especially not in the firearms industry when it could be potentially the difference between their life or not. It's how do we educate? And this takes me back, Mark, to one of the very first conversations me and you ever had. You could come out. This was, I think, after like 2 gun shows of working with you. You came out to Walker area and we were walking around my property. And dude, I had only been in Minnesota for a few years at that point. I didn't know the first damn thing between white pines and red pines. And you explained the difference to me. And you had even said, you go, you know, thank you for asking that question. I said, what do you mean? And he says, well, most people would just pretend like they knew the answer. And I was like, well, what the fuck good does that do me? If I don't know the answer and I just pretend like I know the answer, well, then I don't know the answer. I just am a pompous asshole. You know, and that's the thing is it's so difficult for the modern man to bury their ego. And just go, I don't know. And it's funny because I say this burying of the ego while I just tell a story about how I didn't know something, but I'm kind of getting a little ego boost because of telling that. So we also have to be very honest with ourselves about how we operate as an individual and how the dissemination of information actually takes place on the individual level, from what we take into what we put out and what we truly mean about these things. And for so long, we have a horrible case of know-it-allism in our nation.
Oh God, yeah. And it's just on a final point here, and I'm sure we've all experienced this because we've taken somebody shooting, right? We've all taken somebody shooting, and it's always kind of fun. I think the first time when you like I take the time out before anything's ever done, and we go through the cycle of operation. I explain like this is what this does, this is how this is gonna you know, kind of take place. I try to prepare people before they just grab something and go. And it's always funny when somebody goes to like, whether it's racking the slide or like, especially on ARs for some reason, they'll pull it back and then they'll like kind of let it go forward. And they're just like, oh, it didn't go into battery. Like it, to me, in my brain, it doesn't go into battery, but they're just like, oh, it didn't go forward all the way. And I'm like, it's a machine. Okay.
You
like,
use it.
You can abuse this. Like just, you know, and they're just like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I could do that. Like, yeah, if it breaks, we got bigger problems.
And there you go right there. And that's what we always joke around about with AK platforms. It's like, well, it's not running. Well, did you run it like a Russian? I mean, that's how they're built to use. So
pours vodka down the barrel before he shoots.
Exactly. So
it's really good. It will run perfect now.
So hey, here's my thoughts right now, guys. We're at 2 hours 30 minutes, and this has just been this is fun.
Fun.
Here's Jeremy. No offense to Blake, but this is really Jeremy. He kind of chimes in here. We got to do a follow-up on this subject right here, and then whether we want to make that a little bit more detailed or but I like where we were kind of going with that more detailed conversation. I kind of would like to revisit that and then actually start talking about just some whether it's, if you want to call it, you know, dispelling myths or, you know, or addressing, again, where it all started, you know, with the limp wrist. I mean, God, there's so many things I want to just talk about that just from some body cam video footage that we've maybe most of us
Yeah.
have seen recently, and
Yep.
it demonstrates exactly what you're talking about. But it's
Mhm.
but it also goes to this other thing you guys were just talking about, which is like,
Yeah.
everybody just assumes or they think they know. My biggest
Mhm.
thing is like, we don't know what we don't know. And you know how good I am? I'm smart. You are, let me rephrase that. You know how smart I am? I'm smart enough to realize I don't know everything. So I've got to keep my brain open. I've got to be constantly finding knowledge.
Yeah.
And if somebody points out that, hey, dude, when you're doing this, your grip isn't sufficient enough, as Jeremy said. And
Mhm.
now there's not enough, as the gases are releasing, there's not enough force or stiffness to create the force or to allow the force, so it actually goes back in the battery, right?
Yep.
Again, it's the end of the video, end of the night, and that's kind of like a weak way of saying it, but well, there's the point. It is weak, and that's the problem. I mean, that's what we're saying. You have a weak grip. You're not actually, you don't have to squeeze it.
Right.
See, I'm already kind of going down that road because I want to talk about what I'm
Let's
getting
say
at. What do you guys say? Let's talk about that
Yeah.
stuff a little bit more detailed next time. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Yeah,
Sure.
I think that would be good, because I think there's a lot of little nuances that we can touch on that I think are relevant, but are probably overlooked. And I think a lot of that comes to what I mentioned a little bit before, to where you have people that like that Minuteman idea, but they don't really like know where to go with it. Or you have the guys that see the Delta operator with the high-speed rifle. And so like, I think it would be a good mixture of suggestion and like, hey, like, this is what could be wrong, or this is how to avoid what could be wrong. Or, hey, you have a bullet stuck in your buddy's barrel, and the next round doesn't go forward, kind of like what happened with my buddy at the range the other day. And he's like, oh shit. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably not good. Let's not shoot anymore. And
then how do you deal with that problem?
Yep. And how do you deal with it? Exactly.
And I'm here to tell you, and Blake can probably attest to this, sometimes brute force is the only option for some things.
Yeah. I usually ask customers to leave my shop at that point, though.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's like,
but sometimes you really got to get at it.
Yeah, so. Right.
But you guys are laughing, but you bring up a great point, because there are combat techniques for how you're clearing certain types of jams. And again, totally not scripted. I just had this conversation within the last week. Somebody was, I'm like, well, did you just slam the buttstock into the ground? I mean, like what? I'm like, no, dude, seriously, the buttstock, and you've got, your spring in the back, the buffer spring,
barrel.
What? Well, yeah, I don't have the barrel points in your head, but it is a combat technique. It's like, hey, bam, and then that's going to inject. So let's save that for later. But I actually like that. I think that we should.
Well, and that brings up one other real quick thing. I mean, if we're going to save it for later, but it's training with dummy rounds. Have someone else load your magazine and practice what happens when you have a failure to file, a failure cycle, a stovepipe. We need to train these various things that can happen on a range. Okay, and that I think is something we could talk about in great extent next time if you guys wanted to. So
and I'm raising my glass to you. Again, not scripted. We're just coming up with this at the end of the podcast, and I'm glad you just said that, Blake, because that is so. Jeremy and I, with these podcasts, we're having fun, but we're also trying to take, share information. It isn't just like, we're having a conversation about whatever. We're actually trying to provide some type of details or personal experiences or guests with their subject matter experts, and so we're trying to provide something and bring something back. So what you just said, I think we should do that the next time. And then, and we'll maybe have one or two other people. I'm kind of already thinking about one or two, but I think just even if it's just the three of us, between our personal experiences and our backgrounds, look, if you watch that podcast and you think we're all full of shit, well then, hey, you do you, John Wayne. But I'm here to tell you, these guys know, and I know them, and this isn't look at me, but I've been trained by some pretty square. Like, I'm pretty honored to have had the opportunities I've had. I hopefully have learned one or two things from those people, and if I can share that with somebody else, and if 1 out of 100 people put it in their hip pocket and make it theirs, and if it helps save a life, or I'm all about that. Sure. I think that's what we should do.
Yeah, I like it, man. I dig it. And
I don't know about fun, Blake. I think it would probably be horrible.
The conversation would be fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy the conversation of it. The actual act that we're talking about sounds awful, and I hope to never have to experience it.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't, you took it in a different direction. I wasn't going down it. Yeah. Well, but to Blake's point, and that is ultimately what we are talking about. These are things that hopefully you never have to experience. You never have to, but if you're not prepared for it, and if you're not planning for it, and if you're not training for it, things Jeremy talks about all the time, this is who each and every one of us should be. I mean, we're an American. We're Americans. This is what our founding fathers, this is the life back then. This is what was part of like the guiding principles of their thought process. And that hasn't changed today. I mean, shit, I just saw some stupid little YouTube-y thing the other day talking about New York and I can't remember if it was just broken down to robberies or homicides, but like boys and girls, you already know what I'm talking about. Look around you in the world today. Shit isn't getting any better. Like violent crime, crimes against the person, capers, however you want to phrase it. It's exacerbating. Look at that horrendous video that a whole bunch of people have covered of the two, I don't know if they're teens or adults out in Vegas. They stole the vehicle, they're sideswiping vehicles, and they run that guy down on the bike. That's the
former police chief, actually.
Yep.
Well, it doesn't matter. Police chief or janitor. It's a human being.
Matter.
They ran they ran him over and they laughed about that shit.
Well,
so these subjects that we're talking about, and next time, if we can bring anything to light about any of these things, and if that can help somebody save their life or save their family, I'm all on board. And I don't matter if that's a 4-hour conversation next time.
Well, and I just want to kind of interject one quote here before we end. But Mark, you've put out an iteration like this before, I think kind of in your own words, or maybe you did quote the exact quote, and Blake, you've probably heard this, but it's by a guy named Archilochus. I'm terrible with the ancient names, but essentially
you're terrible with English.
Yeah, no shit, right?
It's not my just ancient names.
It's not my first language. But it says we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. And Mark, we've talked about this several times, and I'm sure you and Blake have talked about this. But look, that's with anything. Like you are only as good as basically your shittiest day. And it's it's whether it's going out and fixing, running through malfunctions with your gun, or whether it's starting a fire, or how about this? Whether it's just being able to provide food for your family. Like it's basic things. Like I know people that burn water, dude. Like I'm convinced you have to try to do that at this point.
Right.
And maybe that's the base level of your training. Maybe, but look, in the end of the day, like the underlying theme, I think with just about any episode that we do this way, and I think these gentlemen will agree, is you have to like put some form of investment, and it's going to require a personal investment. It's going to require a time investment. It's going to require a monetary investment. And that being said,
don't forget a physical and a psychological investment as well.
And look, you don't even have to have, like Mark, we just talked about this the other day. You don't have to start with the most high-speed gear. Go to the surplus stores and buy that stuff and learn how to use it, and then move up to the new stuff. Like it's better to have a $20 investment on mag pouches that you got for an even more of a discount because there's a little tear in train with that, then buy the most high-speed gear right away. Because look, and I mentioned this before in a previous episode too, Mark, competency creates confidence, right? The more competent you become in something, the more confident you get. And you kind of, once you kind of get your, and it's like once you get your groove, you kind of peacock a little bit. So, so it's and it's good, and we should be able to help lift people up like that and be like, hey man, you really you did great today running through these trails, or you did a really good job on this meal, or something like that. And I mean, that's just it, dude. Like
community building.
Community. So
Community
Well,
building.
you guys just said it on top of
So.
each other. I don't know if you guys heard each other, but you both just said community at the same time. Like,
Yep.
and you're
Great minds
absolutely
think
right.
alike, Mark.
Yep. What's
Yeah.
that?
Say great minds think alike. I'll say it.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought you
And
were
broken
telling me.
minds too, but you
Yeah.
know.
Well, in that case,
Hey, so fellas, here's the deal. We're at 240.
Yep.
It's another one of our incredibly way too long podcasts, Jeremy. But time flies.
I really
Like,
want Blake back.
I'm here to tell you, we could sit and
Yeah.
talk, and as everybody else who's, if you're watching and listening to this, you know, because you've done it yourself. You could sit and talk about this for another 6 hours and not
Yes.
and not run out. You would never run out of topics or points.
Dude, we could just
along
talk
this
about
line.
we could just talk about European civilization for hundreds of hours and only scratch the surface. So
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So how about this, boys? It is 2 hours and 40. Yeah, it's 2:40 right now, 2:42. How about look, I've got nothing more to add to this conversation for tonight. I'll just my final comment will be see my initial comment. I'm still at that place in time where I'm trying to figure out how in the fuck have we gotten to this place.
yeah.
How about we do final comments and then Jeremy's outro? So for final comments, let's come to Blake first.
Yep.
And then we'll come to you, Jeremy, and then you can do final comments and then outro, and then take us
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, Blake, you got the floor. Take whatever time you want, but it's final comments on whatever specific subject or topic that we covered tonight, or even something different.
Oh, I think that the biggest takeaway that we kind of keep coming back to again and again and in multiple different fashions throughout this conversation, and we just talked about right here at the end, is community based. You know, I think if none of us have a crystal ball, none of us know what is coming. You know, we can look through history and go, we think it might be this. All right. We can gauge based off past human experiences as to what might be coming, but we don't really know. And I think the biggest takeaway is community based. If you want to survive whatever could come or whatever is coming, is start to rely on your neighbors, start to try to develop those relationships, start to try to prepare yourself, prepare those around you, prepare those that you love, get back to cultural homogeny, get back to the family unit and relying on those that are around you. And sometimes family is not blood, but, try to build instead of just tear down. That would be my biggest thing. I mean, and like we talked about, be it from firearms to other various forms of preparation, is just do what you can when you can with what you have. And even if that isn't much, as long as you take a step forward every day, you're going to be doing better off than you would be if you hadn't taken that step. Because if you never take that step, the high water will overrun you.
Yes. Awesome.
I'm just going to throw this in there because something you said is it's very reminiscent of Churchill, you know, what you can with what you have wherever you are. And that's, I'm applauding you and high-fiving you. That's why I love you.
Sobering, dude.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Double high five.
Double high five.
Yeah. The only thing I have to add to what you just said, Blake, is the only point that I would put into that is be willing to learn from each other. You know, like we just talked about the fact that, you know, we sometimes, you know, we had a discussion about pride, but pride, as good as pride can be, it can also be a very negative thing. And I think unless we're humble enough to be like, hey, you know, I don't know everything. And there's a guy like me and Blake are in the same realm, industry wise. I'm looking to start my own business, and I'm looking to get my feet wet more into that area. But it's like, if there's something I can learn from him, if there's, you know, something that he could show me how to do better, or to help me be a better gunsmith as a person who's been there for a while, I would be stupid to not take the advantage of being like, yeah, like I'm willing to fucking, yeah. And it's like, you know, and that's the thing. It's like, even if even if I was to sit down and be like, hey, Blake, let's sit down and like just fucking with crayons and paper, like let's talk shop about like what we think works, what we don't think works. And like I could learn a shit ton from him, and like he said, vice versa. Like there might be something I would bring up that maybe he didn't even think about or whatever. And it's like, I'll be honest, like I'm not a CNC big machine guy. Like that's just not a background I've had. I would love to learn more about it. And there's some people that do it far better than me. Blake probably knows how to do it a lot better than me. And it's like, So
come on over to the shop sometime.
Yeah.
We'll run the machines. So.
yeah, and that'd be fucking dope, you know. And I will probably take you up on that. More than likely, I will, because it's like that's one of those things there to where it's like I will probably go into it with being like, I don't know shit about it. I don't want to act like I know shit about it. I will baby step my way into it just so that way I can be like, okay, I can at least be competent in basic things for it to make sense. And that's okay, because like as men, that's how we're supposed to learn. Yeah. Women can learn the same way. Like just have enough humility to say, maybe I'm not as good, but have confidence in saying, I know what I'm good at, you know?
Hey, so there it is right there. Have the humility, even if you have the confidence, you know, you're good at this, right? Mm-hmm. But still have the humility to know that you can always be better. Because I don't care how at the highest professional levels of any sport or any competitive, whatever the event is, you're always still striving to be at the next step. Mm-hmm. So again, you know, to use stupid movie references, whether you're a Jedi Knight, you want to be better than Yoda. You know, Yoda wants to be better than Yoda. You know, like, you always have to be. And even when you're talking to a student or a Padawan, whatever it is, I'm here to tell you, if you're open-minded enough, you're still going to learn something from the person who has nowhere near the experience you have, right? Because they're looking at it from a completely different perspective and a different angle. And they might see something that you've been blindsided to for the last 30 years of you doing this professionally. I mean, that's just human nature. Well, again, it's not human nature, I think, but it's if you aspire to be professional, then it's something that shouldn't be foreign to you. That shouldn't be weird, what I just said.
Some of the greatest scientific and engineering discoveries that have ever happened in human history have happened by those that just had a passion for the hobby and never 100%. Had that credential mill certificate, you know? So, I mean, it comes from people wanting to explore new things and understanding they don't know the totality of everything and that they can learn more on a daily basis. The day we stop learning, the day we die.
Hey, I got to give a little plug. You know, you again, not scripted. You just did my company motto: keep thinking, keep moving, never quit, dude. That's to me that is rules to live by right there.
I don't know if I want to spoil it. That's pretty good, guys. I don't know.
All right, are we wrapping it up? That's it. We're gonna wrap it up.
That was fun.
Oh, that was so solid. I don't want to destroy a good thing.
I think
we're three Minnesotans that can't say fucking goodbye. Come on, let's.
See, we were talking about this earlier. Okay, bye. I gotta piss anyway.
Sure you betcha, bud.
Blake, don't go anywhere yet. Don't just hang up. All right, but on that note, seriously, I guess that just happened right there, Redbeard. All right, then take us out, my good man. Hey, for everybody watching, seriously, we're gonna do that. We're gonna do another episode like this. We'll definitely have Blake back on. I mean, 100%. So before Redbeard takes us out, huge shout out for Blake. I'm not gonna say things, but Blake just took a whole hell of a lot of time out of his personal life to be here tonight. So my hat is off to you, sir. Pleasure. As always, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun. It was my pleasure. Very much appreciate it. And please 100%. Come back another time. Because I think then for everybody watching, we have to do this again, and maybe next time. As a matter of fact, leave a comment. Ask if there's a question you want to have asked or addressed in the next episode. We'll do this probably. I mean, I don't know, Jeremy. Let's do this again in the next between 4 and 6 episodes. Dude, well, this is 26, so we've got 3 more episodes before we do the mashup. So either we do one more in this iteration, or we start the next iteration off with the same.
I'm not gonna lie. Consider me biased, Mark, but I really want to do another one before we do our mashup, because if it works for Blake, because
I could probably make it work.
You know, I just really, I'm very biased right now, but this has been, I did not expect an hour of philosophy and then going into gun talk. So like,
all right. So somewhere in the next 3 episodes, we're going to do part 2 to this right here. Then,
all right, fair
enough. Right there. Oh, fair enough. Okay. Blake, any final comments? Otherwise, we're going to turn it over to Redbeard for our outro.
God bless and stay free.
Hell yeah.
That's a pretty damn good final comment right there. Seriously. All right. Redbeard, do you want to add to any of this other stuff, or are you going to take us out, sir?
No, God, no. I'm not going to ruin a good thing.
I think we did that about an hour ago.
I know we did. All right, guys.
All right. Take us out, sir.
I appreciate you coming on, Blake, and it's been real. And I will,
Appreciate it.
yeah, we will find some time to link up because that would be freaking dope. You know, Mark, as always, thank you for helping.
Honestly, I just
me.
gotta throw this. Seriously, I'm gonna add one more little thing.
Yeah.
You know how you and I were gonna go shooting yesterday. So boys and girls, seriously, Jeremy and I were talking about, like, you know, going
Yep.
to the range. Okay, this is what everybody should be doing.
Yeah.
Jeremy, I actually think we should have this. And so Blake, when we end this, don't hang up.
Yeah.
Don't go. You know, the recording will stop it, and then we're gonna do an after action review. But
Yep.
boys and girls, stay tuned. Maybe, Jeremy, on that note, maybe we should try to do that and get Blake and all three of us get together and do that. So
Dude, that would be
there's
awesome.
a couple different ways
Yeah.
we could do this. That just came out of nowhere. I would love to fucking hang out with you, the two of you on the
Yeah.
range. That would be
Yeah, it'd be a
awesome.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, just had to throw this out there. All right,
Yeah,
Redbeard,
no,
take us out there.
absolutely. I concur.
right.
No, I just wanted to say, you know, Mark, I haven't said it to you. I don't think for a long time, but thank you for helping kind of make this happen because, you know, we talked about this a long time before we even started this podcast, you know, and everything that we've gone through and like all of the work that you do, like, I don't think people realize how much work you actually put in. And so it's a big deal.
Not as
you know,
much as I would like.
Yeah.
to tell the truth.
And, you know, and the thing of it is like, I'm appreciative of it because we together had this idea. You've really helped bring this along and I'm appreciative of that. So this is cool. And we couldn't do it without everybody who watches. So on
And
that
we couldn't
note,
do it without the great men and women who've taken the time out
Oh,
of their
God.
life to join us.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
100%.
Yep. So that's you, Blake. Here's to you, sir. You still got a drink?
I do.
I have Agua.
Alondra.
Cheers.
So,
There you go. Agua's okay. Cheers.
so, all right. On that note, look,
Take us
the
out.
flame of liberty shall not and will not be extinguished so long as there's good people willing to preserve and defend it. And that means each and every one of you. And like Mark says in our intro, you are the resistance. So this is dependent on you guys. We are very happy to have you guys come in, and we hope that you left a little bit more educated than when you first came here. So on that note, here we are. We're ready to go, and I hope you enjoyed.
All right, everybody. Be good. We'll see you next time. Big, huge shout out once again to Blake for joining us tonight. Everybody be good.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Redbeard.
Thanks, guys.
Woo!